Well, welcome. Got it. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the quarterly meeting of the Youth Development Council. I am happy to see all your faces chiming in there, and I know 8 o'clock comes up on us quick. So let's go ahead and I'll turn over to Melissa for a roll call.
Thank you so much. I want to remind everyone that this is a public meeting that is being recorded, and there will be time at the end for public comment. And I've admitted a few guests into the meeting today, so welcome. Appreciate you being here. And I will do roll call of our YDC members. Zan Ojiro.
Present. Good morning.
Eric Cardella.
Here.
Parasa Chanrami. Janine Hartley.
Good morning, here.
Celeste Jansen. Robin Johnson. Andy Leonard. Oh, is that Robin on the phone? That may or may not be Robin on the phone, unmuting.
Somebody.
Okay. Yep. I'll put a maybe for on our roll call. Andy Leonard. Habidi Lewis. Adrian Livingston. Erica McAlpin. Christina McMahon. Maricela Ortega Guzman.
Here.
Jeff Parker. Molly Rogers.
I'm here.
Welcome. Diana Rojas. Andy Santana May. Karen Spencer.
I'm here.
You saw Karen. Janelle Theobald. So Janelle.
Here.
Liz Thorne. Koi Vu. Kiwi Wilson. All right, that is the end of the roll call. I will tally up and see if we're at quorum.
Melissa?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Hi, this is Christina McMahon. I'm here. I just couldn't unmute before you moved on.
Oh, thank you, Christina. All right, you are marked present. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brian, back to you for now.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. I gotta go with my son to high school. Thanks everybody for being here. Melissa's checking in on the whether or not we have quorum. We've got our breakout rooms happening between roughly, well, in probably about 10 minutes or so after we just do a couple of other announcements and then and updates. So we'll see as people get here. We'll probably add a few more folks. So stay tuned to that. So I just a couple of reminders. Please, when you are speaking, say your name when you start so that we have your name for the record. Also, just as a reminder to folks, the meeting is being recorded. So that's a public meeting of the council, and so it's being recorded. This is a formal meeting. If you are a member of the public, there will be, or if you're a member of the public and wish to comment, there is a public comment period at the end of the meeting, probably around 11:50 or so. So we'll make sure that when we get to that time, we can let you know. Each member of the public will have up to 3 minutes to speak per person. If you would like to comment during that public comment period, please send a chat directly to Melissa Gallardo, which is on the kind of right side of your screen, so that she is aware that you want to speak, and we can have a sense of how many speakers we have as we get toward the end of the meeting. So that's just a little bit of housekeeping. Melissa, how are you doing on the quorum count? Are we at 10 or 11 people?
We are currently at 8 and we need 12. So I will update you, Brian, and the chairs and co-chairs as we move closer to the votes to see how we're doing.
Okay.
I know
Tabitha's
I know we're
coming-
expecting more members. Yeah.
Yeah, Tabitha's coming in in about 5 minutes, and Robin is just trying to navigate traffic, so we'll get through that piece. I just want to take a couple of minutes. I know we're about quarter after to introduce a new member of the council, and it is Janelle Theobald, who is, I saw her somewhere. He's put on the screen. There she is. I see her now. I see waving, Janelle. We really appreciate your joining the council. I can have Janelle do a little introduction, but what I know, having spoken to her a little bit and her mother, is Janelle's a high school student, had expressed interest in being on the council based on, I think, another kind of school and or family connection. Janelle, you can remind us of that. But it's exciting to have a younger voice. We've got some other younger voices, and I don't know, we all maybe in our right, even despite our age, have some sort of youthful spirit to add to the conversations. But Janelle, we're really excited to have you on board. I know you're taking time out of your school day to be here, and there's going to be a lot to hear and learn as you are involved with the council. So we'll do our best to answer questions and to kind of guide you along. I think that when we do some of the breakouts, you'll get to meet a few people in a little bit of a smaller kind of venue. So Janelle, do you want to just add anything about your background and what brought you to the council?
Yeah, I mean, and so, yeah, I like, I guess like just a little bit about me. My name is Janelle Theobald. I'm in 10th grade, and let's see, yeah, I really like things like art and reading, music, and that besides that, in school I also do a lot of advocacy work. So I founded a nonprofit organization called Let's Peer Up, and and yeah,
Janelle, that's perfect. We appreciate the introduction.
Welcome, Janelle.
Want to add anything else? No pressure, although it's probably pressure. We appreciate the intro.
yeah, so I was born with different like physical and developmental disabilities, including autism. So I kind of, I mean, as when I was younger, I struggled with school a lot. And that, I know that I'm actually pretty lucky because I had a good support system, but I know that like there are other youth who are not as lucky, and they yeah, so I wanted to join the council to, you know, represent all these different people. I know that I can't represent like absolutely everyone, but I can at least provide some insights. And
All right. Hey, Janelle, that's perfect. I want to get to this other staff person that I want to introduce. Can I do that?
yeah,
Okay. Janelle, that was awesome. So appreciate your involvement. And you see some comments in the chat. We're just appreciative to have you here, and know that at some point in the nearish future, we will get to actually meeting in person. So stay tuned for that. So Janelle, you can remute, perfect, and then we'll do our best, and I'll just encourage other speakers and committee members, right? And Janelle, this is something, as we've added new members to the council, we're always willing and able to kind of check in and say, you know, hey, is there something that needs more explanation? Are there questions? So you'll hear some of that when we do the breakouts. Some folks can help fill in blanks if you have any, or if you want to send a direct message to me or to Melissa at any point. We sometimes use acronyms and short and or speak really quickly because we've got a really full agenda. So don't hesitate to check in as we're going through the agenda if we need to catch you up, because we're working pretty fast. All right, I'm going to move to one other thing, or at least related to kind of quick announcements, and that is on the call too. We have a new staff member whose name is Sally Deck. Sally is our Future Ready analyst. Future Ready is the legislation passed in the short session to support diversifying and building the workforce of tomorrow. And Youth Development Division has roughly $3 million in this biennium, which is going to, as you all know, come to an end in June 30. So it's not a lot of time, but we've made grants to different organizations, and Sally will be the grant manager for those Future Ready youth grants. Sally, do you want to just take a minute for say a quick hello and a word or two?
Yeah, so super quick hello. I am delighted to get to be part of this organization. It was wonderful to meet a couple of you at the community conversation in Corvallis on Monday. That was a great opportunity, yeah. And this team is clearly so talented, and I really am so pleased to be joining it and to be able to get to do this hard work together. So thank you. Back to you, Brian.
Thanks, Sally. And hey, Janelle, I will mention you hopefully know this, but we have a community conversation in somebody's going to help remind me. What is it, next Monday?
Hey, Brian. Yeah, it's next Monday in Hillsborough. Yeah, we have the last in-person community conversation is next Monday, December 12th in Hillsborough from 12 to 2:30. The registration is on our website for it. I don't remember the address right offhand, but.
Hey, Paul, could you maybe drop into the chat just
Absolutely.
like the registration link, and Janelle and others on the council? But Janelle, my recollection is that you live kind of somewhere in the West Metro area and go to school. So, and again, it's during the school day, zero pressure whatsoever for you to have to attend. But if you had time, it's late morning, if I'm not mistaken, right, Paul? On Monday the 12th, we'd love to see you there, maybe with your mom or whoever would make sense. But you've got school. School is more important than coming to this meeting. But if you felt like you could make it, it would be a good opportunity to meet some folks in person. All right. So next on the agenda, quick, and so we're a little bit behind schedule, so I'm going to kind of run through this stuff fairly quickly. Is the land acknowledgement. We didn't start with a land acknowledgement, and we haven't for the last few meetings, because we've made an assignment to the Equity and Disparity Committee to come up with a different kind of acknowledgement, and maybe even more sort of present and future action oriented statement. So the committee is still working on that. And I think has a meeting later this month where some of our staff have been working on a draft, and I think that committee will get to see some of our ideas. We've had some really, I think, good meetings as a part of our community engagement efforts. And when we're doing community conversations in areas where there are tribal nations and sovereign nations represented. And so Paul and I and other staff have had a chance to connect with about 4 tribal nations as a part of in the last few months, and in 2 or 3 others in the spring and summer. And so we're excited to kind of build on that, those engagements, and have some ideas which you'll hear about later that will really help us articulate kind of what our actions and commitments are with tribal nations. So there's a link. Well, there's not a link. Maybe Melissa, if you want to drop the link to the land acknowledgements guidance, I don't know, or maybe we'll send it to the council after. We've gotten some guidance from the Legislative Committee on Indian Services that the committee is looking at. And so more soon on land acknowledgement and kind of broader recognition and commitments as it relates to tribal nations. Any quick questions on that? Or I don't know, I know that Jared and Bill and if Erica's on here, we may hear a little bit more about that when we have the committee update later in the meeting. I don't see any hands. I don't see anything in the chat, so I'll just keep us moving. All right, so quick review of the agenda. I think you all have it. Maybe Melissa, you could pull it up on the screen real quickly. It was on the screen when we logged in. We'll do breakout rooms here in a couple minutes. We'll have a little break, maybe right at the top of the hour, just to make sure we're all set. Talk a little bit. We'll move, I think, into our state advisory group and juvenile justice committee. There is a vote that we want to do there. We'll talk about youth grants and requests for applications. We will provide more of an update on the community engagement and the community conversations. Then we'll have a legislative and directors update and discussion. We'll take a break around 11. We'll have a reading of our re-engagement rules. We'll have committee updates after that. I'll do a little roundup around 11:30, 11:35, and then public comment should be around 11:50. So that's the agenda. Thanks for putting that up, Melissa. In the breakouts, as you look at that agenda, I think we emailed it to you. It's also available probably on our website. But in the breakouts, if you have questions about agenda items, I would ask them then as a part of the breakouts. I think we're able to get at least one staff member in each of those breakouts. So bring your questions there. We may probably do those breakouts. We'll probably try to keep them to about 20 minutes this morning because we are a few minutes behind. And I think that's it for me, at least in this part of the meeting. Melissa, any updates from you around kind of quorum and additional council members who have joined us?
I don't think so. We're not quite at quorum yet, but I do have breakout rooms ready to go if we want to do that. And I will keep time on those and send messages to the groups. I'm putting a link in the chat to just the YDD homepage where you can find the documents for this meeting if you don't have them already, including the re-engagement rules.
Perfect. Thank you so much,
Melissa. And
Melissa.
the agenda. Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Appreciate that. All right. We are going to get sent everybody to a breakout room. These are meant to be fairly informal spaces. Introduce yourselves. The guiding questions are more around just like checking in with how things are going. Do you have any questions on the agenda itself? Are there things, were you able to attend a community conversation, perhaps sharing some insights or observations? You could talk about your holiday plans. I'll leave it up to you all.
All right, I'll open up the rooms. Hey, Rafi, I'm trying to send you to Brian's room. We'll see if that'll work. Hmm. We'll have Good morning, Cheryl. Thank you for joining us. Everyone is in a breakout room right now, just sort of having a check-in. So I'd like to go ahead and add you to a breakout room straight away.
thanks for bringing us back, Melissa. I'm imagining, as was happened in our group, is just as we hit 8:45, the momentum was starting, and then the timer said, you have 60 seconds in your breakout. That's not a criticism of anybody, just how these things go. All right, so I don't know if folks want to, I know Tabidi, I know you're here. I am not able to, I can scroll through and see if Robin has been able to join. I don't see her, but perhaps, well, just welcome Tabidi, welcome. I saw Liz, if I'm not mistaken. Hello, Liz. So we've added a couple more, maybe Melissa, we're getting closer to a quorum.
Closer, we're at 10. We need 12.
More. So we'll, I know we're sending emails to try to get people to get a couple more texts, you know, but
Okay.
yeah, so we're there. I just wonder if there are any report outs from those breakout conversations, just nothing formal, but just any reflections or observations from the discussions in your breakout groups.
We were just sharing recipes and comfort foods. So Abe, Sam, Anya, and Bill and I are going to have dinner. It's going to involve tamales, some eggnog for Bill, beef Wellington. We're getting hungry.
Yeah, Karen says yum in the chat. I'm with her. I'm joining that dinner.
Okay.
Other comments? Tabidi, I hear your voice.
Oh, no, I didn't. I wasn't sure if you wanted, I will be quiet. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to ask if there were others who had something to say, but you're doing fine. Go
yeah.
right ahead.
One of us will do it.
I'll jump in. I had the pleasure of meeting with Brian and Molly Rogers, and Tabidi joined us a little later, and we had a guest, Cheryl Zwillinger, with us as well. And we had a great conversation that started, I think, mostly about legislative issues, given the roles that the three of us play that were initially there. And then we wandered to the community conversations and how those had been going, and talked a little bit about mini Herefords and the cold of Wyoming.
Yeah, and then we rounded it up with a little conversation about collective impact and collaboration.
Yep. Thank you for that, Tabidi.
Any other share outs?
Okay, I'll go for our group. It was the Cord Room. Luckily, they don't charge rent for that or to hang out, but it was a very fun room to be in. We talked about why we got involved with the YDC and YDD. Janelle was in our room, so we talked a lot about that. And then the community visits, got some report back on what those were like and the impressions on them. And then I think we just ended up with being very grateful to have Janelle on the board and trying to give her advice to just soak it all in.
Thank you, Karen. Any others?
I don't know if I'm supposed to go for my group or not, but I'll jump in. We had Sally and Janine and Cheryl A couple others in our Marciela, sorry, in our group, and we just had a nice conversation around kind of the current work, and so got to meet Sally a little bit more in depth. So that was a nice piece. And we also talked about food because Janine set up a wonderful dinner when we were in Roseburg for a community conversation. So we had a little conversation about food as well. Seems to be a common thing. I don't know if anybody from my group had anything else they wanted to share.
Don't be shy. Don't be shy. No, no one? Okay. I believe in the awkward silences to alleviate some of the pressure from folk. I know we're supposed to take a break from until 9 a.m. So it is not quite 8:55, but if no one is opposed to dipping out for a break 2 minutes early, then why don't we do that if that's okay?
I think that sounds good. Yeah, everybody get a little break. We'll get started right back at 9. I'll just say again, we've got some important votes happening. So it is uber critical that everybody come back. And then we'll hope that, I think as Melissa indicated, we need a couple of other folks. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we can get Robin. There was like a car accident on the highway. So hopefully we can get her added, and then we'll need at least one more person. I know Christina was on the phone at one point. So I think, yeah, I still see that phone number that I assume is Christina. But hopefully beyond Christina, we can get one more person. We've got a couple texts out to folks. So yeah, I'll stop talking. 6 minutes for a break.
Okay. Come back. Okay, it is 9 a.m. And so I'm hoping we can stay on track here. So the next portion of our agenda is a staff update and some discussion about member terms being renewed. So Brian and Melissa, if you will, please give us the updates around these items.
We will do that.
I think it's, okay, go ahead.
No, go, what were you gonna say to me?
No, go ahead. Yeah, that's right, go ahead.
And Melissa, I know you're kind of watching for additional attendees. I've been texting with Andy, who had some staffing work that Andy from the council had some staffing work, but he's going to join, I think, pretty soon. And hopefully we'll get Robin in as she's hopefully can get off the highway.
Yeah, Jeff Parker has also joined us. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, great. So we're getting there.
Thank you.
I don't know why it's not there.
Thanks, Jeff. So some updates you heard earlier for those who are on at 8, that Sally Deck has joined our team as the Future Ready Youth Analyst and Grant Manager. So those who are on got to hear a little bit from her, and I'm sure over the course of the coming weeks, months, and years, you'll hear more from Sally as she focuses on that grant management. Tanasia Bishop, who joined our team, oh goodness, I think it's a little more than a year ago as a temporary employee, and then a few months, maybe it was 6 months, 4 to 6 months later, joined us in a permanent role supporting the reengagement team and work, but then more recently had to go on leave due to an accident. but her plan is to return in February. So we'll be excited to have Tanasia back and working in the early February timeframe and back on staff. We probably will, if we can find somebody, hires a person on a temporary basis. So if you have ideas, council members, on anybody who might be looking for temporary work, it'll probably, by that I mean, it'll probably be 20, 30 hours. And we can fill in details, but it'd be kind of a temporary assignment. You don't get a lot of the state, I don't think get any real state benefits. You get paid a kind of pretty straight hourly wage, but it can be a good opportunity to kind of get in with state work and state of Oregon work, generally state government work. So just if you have an idea, know a person who's looking for not completely full-time work, but is interested in youth and in educational issues, be in touch with either me or Paul or even Melissa, and we can get you information, or you can make a connection to us for us. And then on the hiring front, I don't know, maybe I'll turn it over to Anya. Anya, do you want to announce the new hire in the prevention and justice team?
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Brian. So I'm delighted to let you know that we've finally completed the recruitment process for the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Coordinator position. And after first search failed, unfortunately, but good things come to those who wait, I think. So we've offered the position and person accepted, and his name is Lawrence White, and he has a background in law enforcement in the neighboring state of Washington. But what we really liked, I probably shouldn't be saying that we liked, but I think we shared that sentiment, that his view of the world is, after being in law enforcement for so long, he realized that his heart is in human services, and that's what he's transitioning into helping kids within juvenile justice to get fair and adequate treatment. Anyway, so super excited about that. Will start working for us in January, but he's such an amazing trooper. So he's flying to San Diego with us on Monday, even before he starts working for YDC, to attend the Federal Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention training, which will be helpful in his work. Anyway, I've talked too much, but really happy about that. And I think once you meet him, you will share my excitement. Thank you.
Thanks, Anya. Yeah, we're excited about that. And great that he's going to be able to attend that training. I think it'll be a good way to start. And next, Melissa, do you want to cover the member terms update, just so folks are aware? I don't want to spend a ton of time here, other than just to let people know kind of where they stand in their terms, just as the quickest of context. And Melissa, hopefully I'm not going to repeat what you were going to say, but council terms are 4 years, and a member can serve up to 2 terms. So you can serve for up to 8 years. And so we've wanted to just relay very quickly where we are with some members who are either coming to the end of their first term, or maybe, I don't think, but Melissa will say whether we have anybody who's coming to the end of their 8 years. And just, again, for transparency and information's sake, this is, I think, important for us to just be tracking and following as we have a governor transition. We'll be working closely with the new Governor-elect Kotek, around, appointments and things like that. And then I think we even have some folks whose first terms probably ended in the summer or fall. So we just want to let you know that we are aware, and hope that by your continued presence that you're aware that you're now in your second term. Take it away, Melissa.
Thank you, Brian. That is correct. We have 7 council members whose terms are up for reappointment, I guess I would say, for their second term. I'll just list you real quick so you know who I'm talking about. You will also receive an email from me with instructions for what to do about the reappointment. So that's Zan Ojero, Parasa Chanrami, Andy Leonard, Tabidi Lewis, Jeff Parker, Molly Rogers, Karen Spencer. It looks like you all joined about the same time, and your first terms are coming to a close. And so Brian mentioned some gubernatorial transition. That's not the only one we have. There's a new process for reappointment, and it's all through Workday. So I'm learning right along with all of you how that will go. So I will send out that information as soon as I know it and understand it. And that does segue into the next part that we were going to talk about. Brian, want me to keep going? All right. The next part of the agenda is talking about the required training that now all council members are required for the state. I know you've been receiving emails, so have I. And there has been some confusion in making sure all of our council members are in Workday and can log in and can actually complete the training. So I also have an email to go out specifically about that. It won't be wrapped up in another email. It will be one with a subject heading just about this training that's required. It's due by the end of the year, and there are 2 or 3 trainings that are required. So it's the same training that all state employees are required to do. So if you have any questions, you can ask me or Brian or any one of us on YDD, because we've all gone through it as well. I think that's it. Brian, anything else?
Are they required to do the timekeeping one too, Melissa?
That's the one I'm not totally sure on, so I need to double check.
Oh yeah.
I think so, but yeah, we'll see.
Oh yeah. So yeah, we've been trying to track this. This is a big, the big part is the transition, getting council, board, commission members into Workday. Workday is the kind of enterprise-wide system that the state uses for training and learning, for timekeeping, for obviously and payroll. It is also a kind of personnel information space. So staff information and board, commission, council information, your resume and or what position, just basically what position you're in as a council member. It's all being stored in this one system. So it is through that system that, again, trainings like this will happen. And it's been a little rocky, but we appreciate your patience. And yes, the need to get these things done is paramount. Rather than spending a lot of time in today's meeting, follow up with Melissa or me and anticipate an email with directions on what you need to do.
There's one, Brian, sorry, there's one other part about the being in Workday is if there's ever compensation for being a monetary compensation, that has to go through Workday as well. So I think that's the other part for why everyone has to be in there and be trained up on it.
So by compensation, I'm assuming like when we get back to in-person meetings, we do have resources to reimburse folks for travel, for example. So that's, travel expenses can be covered. So it's important that you're in the system for that reason. And there was legislation passed in the last session around just kind of general compensation, particularly for those council and or board members, right, who bring important lived experience, but when they're having to miss work or miss school or job or something like that, I think that there's legislation that does then enable us to compensate folks for their time. I won't know all the details, but that's again important. And then appreciate, and I'm getting a little message here too. Cord is telling me directly, which I appreciate, Cord, that council members also can receive per diem under certain circumstances that may be per diem when we're having you, attend a conference. Tabidi went to the OJDDA conference, which is the Juvenile Directors Association conference. And so there are various situations and circumstances where, again, being in that system will be really critical to, getting important resources to you. We don't have a ton of time, but we got about 7 more minutes. Are there questions? Molly asked in the chat, are you notified when we complete? Yes, I think, Melissa, you're saying, yeah, there's the state is sending emails to me and Melissa about when people haven't completed trainings. And so in short, yes, we also, I think, we'll get access to when different people go into the system and complete it. So, and the state is tracking this pretty closely based on the number of reminders I'm getting on a weekly basis. Eric?
Yeah, just to make sure I'm clear, I know Melissa said it needs to be done by the end of the year. So are we waiting for more instructions from Melissa for those of us like myself who need to renew our trainings, or is there a way that we can go in and self-enroll? And may just be user error. I followed the link, but it seemed like it kept saying needed an administrator to give you access. So can we do that now, or do we need to wait for instructions from you, Melissa?
Eric, I'd say you can try it because there have been some wrinkles like that are getting ironed out in the process.
Okay.
I will be sending out an overall email, but you're welcome to go back and try the previous ones and see if that particular iron is.
Yeah, it's probably been a month since I clicked the link, but I can go back and look again. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Any other questions or comments, whether in the chat or otherwise? Yeah, I again recognize this is, we got about 3 weeks left in the calendar year. So we'll double check on the workday piece. These other 2 trainings, preventing discrimination, harassment, and the information security training, aren't terribly long, and I will tell you that, and Melissa or staff, correct me if I'm wrong, there is with these trainings often a test at the end. So listening and paying attention is important, because then they will ask you 10 or 12 questions to test whether you listened and paid attention. And if you don't score, I think it's like 85% or better, then you will get another shot at it, but you will then have to, I don't think you'll have to retest until you test above 85%. So keep that in mind. Anything else on that topic? All right, moving us forward, we can get to a few of the votes, which I know we're wanting to do, particularly if we have quorum and there's just some presentations associated with these. Go ahead, Melissa.
Right. Oh, just one thing. We were also going to let you know about the quarterly meetings that are coming up in 2023. So I'm just going to drop those in the chat.
Do that.
Those are scheduled, and you'll keep an eye out on your calendar.
I'll say, and actually, Tabitha, I'll throw it back to you here in a sec, but unless Robin's here, which I just haven't seen yet, but I'll say very quickly, and I don't know, maybe if folks want to comment on this in the chat, I think that we should try to target the March date for an in-person meeting. It's your meeting, council members, but I think if we put that there, I think we could get ourselves organized. And Eric, I appreciate the conversation you and I had about this. If we need to make some accommodation for folks who can't attend in person, letting me or Melissa know that. But rather than this trying to do a hybrid meeting, which has just been challenging, I would recommend that the council say, let's put a line in the sand or a marker in the sand around a March 9th in-person meeting and put all of our energy and effort toward that. And then as things come up, a couple folks may need us to figure out something virtual, then we'll figure that out. What if, again, not wanting to spend a ton of time on this, but if that's what I think. I see a Tabidi with wonderful. I'm not sure if the Tabidi wonderful was to this idea of meeting in person or was wonderful that we have the dates. But Tabidi, I'm going to throw it back to you so you can bring us to our
My
next.
wonderful was two-pronged. First,
Oh,
it
yeah.
was wonderful that we have a quorum, and wonderful regarding the idea of trying to meet in person. So, yeah. Okay, well,
Yeah, and
thank
I'll
you.
just echo that. I mean, Brian and I did have a conversation at the well, just in conversation through the community conversations activity that happened. And I will acknowledge that it's easy for those of us who are, along the I-5 corridor or near, west side of the state to say, let's get together in person, and that not everyone is in that situation. I think that the benefit having a number of new council members and even folks who have been now apart for 4 years and have maybe only met in person once or twice. The benefit is just to be able to build community, understand who we have on the council. It's an exciting time, I think, to be looking at the next biennium. So if you're looking for council members' voices, I would love to see the opportunity to meet in person. And as Brian said, there may be a situation related to travel or a conflict that folks need to request an opportunity to zoom in, but my vote would be to transition back to a default to in-person for the quarterly meetings. It's once per quarter and we should be able to plan ahead. But that is my perspective that I shared with Brian.
Well, Eric, that was perfect timing. You took it right to 9:20. That was beautiful. Now we'll move to the State Advisory Group and Juvenile Justice Committee update, Anya and Molly, and then we'll have a vote around juvenile crime prevention planning guidelines. So,
Hey, Tabidi, just real quick, Janelle, thanks so much for the comment in the chat. Really appreciate it. This comment, I see it, and so we can be in touch with you, Janelle, to figure out how to support your participation. So thanks for the comment.
Well, good morning again. I think I'm supposed to say my name now for the record. So I'm Anya Sikina, the Juvenile Crime Prevention Manager of the Youth Development Division, and we have a bit of a presentation prepared for you, and hopefully Melissa will be able to help us with it, to show it. That's it. Okay, that's mine. Molly, Christina, Sam, Andy, the members of the Juvenile Justice Committee, please help me at any point you feel like saying something, or definitely when I ask you for help. Hopefully that will work. So Melissa, if you don't mind showing things. So there are a couple of things that I would like to share with you regarding the Juvenile Justice Committee update. There is a state fund responsibility that we will talk about first, and that will require your support, maybe in form of a vote, or that to approve the juvenile crime prevention planning guidelines that the Juvenile Justice Committee has developed for your review. And the second part is the couple of things I want to share with you about the state advisory group functioning, and that's vis-a-vis federal funds that we receive from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. So those are the two things, but I'm really afraid to lose the momentum of a quorum. So let's talk about the JCP planning guidelines first, if that's okay with you. So believe it or not, the new biennium is coming this way, our way, and we have to do it again. we have to come up with the guidelines for the counties and the tribes to develop and present to us their juvenile crime prevention plans. This is just very briefly, this is a reminder of responsibilities of the council, which are mandated by law in Oregon. And this ORS 417-850 is basically describes other duties of the council. Everything that you as a as a council need to do for approval, administration of the juvenile crime prevention funding, as well as the federal funds, those responsibilities are all described in statute. So I don't know if we should be reading this, but the Youth Development Division provides juvenile crime prevention funds to counties and tribes for programs focused on youth at risk for juvenile crime, and establishes criteria for the local high-risk juvenile crime prevention plans. These criteria include, but are not limited to, measuring changes in juvenile crime and recidivism. So basically in that paragraph is what the juvenile crime prevention funds are, where they go to, and the criteria are the guidelines that we will be discussing in a moment. Except in the guidelines, we don't call them criteria, we call them essential elements of the plan. We're also required by statute to work with tribal governments to develop tribal high-risk juvenile crime prevention plans. So today we're talking about local county plans, not tribal ones. The tribal plans we're working on the guidelines with the tribal JCP prevention coordinators, as well as NPC research, Juliet Mackin, who has been working in that field for close to 20 years now. So that's a separate thing. So today, what we have for you is the county guidelines. We also need to review the budget and allocation formula for appropriation for the purpose of juvenile crime prevention, and review the components of local plans once they're submitted. So, Melissa, if you don't mind moving on. So the next statute, 417-855, that describes what goes inside of a local county JCP prevention plan. So each board of county commissioners will choose a lead agency, and that lead agency will have the responsibility to bring community together, known as partnership, and develop a high-risk juvenile crime prevention plan. So as a reminder, our agreements are intergovernmental, so they acting, I think I'm still kind of confused. I think it's still Oregon Department of Education acting through the Youth Development Division that enters into an agreement with a county and a tribe. So our agreements are usually signed by the boards of county commissioners or the county administrator or the tribal chair, not by the lead agency. And they're functioning of what goes into the plan, with the statute defines what kind of risk factors and how many kids must display and need to be assessed for in order to be eligible for JCP services. And the next one, that's on the council. You have to establish a minimum grant award to small counties, and that minimum grant level shall be determined by the council through a public process and reviewed by council biennially. At this point, we don't know how much money will be appropriated for JCP funds. I believe it's at the same level we're anticipating for the next biennium as it currently is. So we will get to that conversation once we know the actual allocation that will be available for us. And the lead agency will submit the JCP plan in accordance with the planning guidelines. And another caveat here, the plan must be supported by local public safety coordinating councils, or if there's absent of such in the community, because not every county has Leipzig, then the county governing body will approve a submitted plan. Melissa, if you could go next to the next slide, please. So this is what we've come up with. And from this point on, I would really appreciate if Molly, Christina, Sam, Andy, whoever is, I cannot see everybody. I see the slide and I see like 3 faces. So whoever is here and want to say something, please don't be shy. So we've had a work group organized that was comprised of members of the Juvenile Justice Committee, as well as county juvenile department directors and Oregon Youth Authority. Because another part of the funding is, so it's a kind of 3-legged stool. It's all called juvenile crime prevention, but there are 3 funding streams within the funding large pot. There's JCP prevention, which is what we're talking about. That's our funding that YDD and YDC are responsible for. And then OIA administers basic and diversion funds that go to counties through Oregon Youth Authority. So the state acts through Oregon Youth Authority for that matter. But those plans, they need to kind of align on a local level, and that's where we'll get to it. So in the planning process, counties need to show that community partners were engaged in the development of the plan. They have to come up with the goals for the plan. What goals are you trying to achieve? Informational local community juvenile justice issues, barriers, and service gaps. So basically, so the funds will fit within the community needs. And also summary of data supporting the recommended strategies. And we will be sharing, so each county has their own racial relative rate index reports looking at disparities within their juvenile justice system continuum. But also NPC Research, the evaluator, and you've seen their presentation in September, they talked about the overall statewide evaluation report for the previous biennium for JCP services. So each county received their own individual JCP evaluation report from the last biennium. So those bits of information are available and we'll be sharing with them, providing technical assistance along the way. We also had a conversation about education data. We really don't have it like a canned data sets available on a county level, but if community is interested in looking into education data, we'll see what we can do to support that effort. The population to be served, I think, Molly, I need your help here because I will just say that it's within our policy, right, to set the age for the population to be served. Up until today, the age group was 10 to 17, but there were some exceptions done by counties depending on the target population that they had. So we are proposing to extend the age to 7, the earlier, to support both good practice. The younger kids need services as well, but also some potential legislative changes that are coming our way. Molly, want to talk about that a little?
Sure, I'd be glad to. So I really appreciate, Anya, your presentation and really the collaboration that occurred to work on the plan. And so one of the changes that there's a legislative concept to reduce, well, to increase or set an age when youth can be petitioned for a delinquency matter into the court. And right now in the state of Oregon, there is no set age, but there is legislative concept to set that, and that is kind of then opens up this gap of youth who are a little bit younger wouldn't be able to access some services, because oftentimes an adjudication for a 9, 10, or an 11-year-old is so that they can access services, which doesn't necessarily seem like the right way to access services. So the legislation also has additional resources to focus on services for this younger age population. And it makes sense that it really falls in the juvenile crime prevention funding, which is really targeted at preventing youth from further penetrating the system. And so this just expands the age from 10, the lower end, to 8, to just acknowledge that so counties don't have to ask for exceptions along the way. There are a couple of counties that really have done this well over the years and have asked for an exception to serve this population. And the data continues to support that that has reduced risk factors and prevented youth from coming into the system. So this is truly just looking at the bottom end going from 7 to 8, or from 10 to 8. Did that help, Anya? Any questions?
It certainly helped me. Thank you. But the question, are there any questions from the council members? Not hearing any, so I take it out.
I have a quick question. Look, about how often would you receive an exception from a county? Is it like once or twice annually or every few years? Just trying to get an understanding of what's happening.
So,
yeah, so I think currently there's just currently one exception. If the bill passes and puts a floor on the age for delinquency petitions, I think that there's a feeling that we actually want to dedicate funds to that age of 8 to 12. And so then it would be more that would be falling under the exception. But right now, I believe it's just one county that serves younger than 10.
Correct. That would be Marion County. They've requested that extension exception several years ago, and they maintain this programming that will encompass the whole family, including younger siblings.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Oh, Zan, you have a question?
Yeah.
No, I was just going to add that here in Benton County, based on the numbers that we serve, and usually about 80 kids on a caseload at any given time, but there are usually 1 or 2 that are in that younger age cohort that really need service, and that we see repeatedly over time. And if we can't address their needs early on, then they do become involved in a formal adjudication. And it's just, it's a horrible feeling for our juvenile department staff to watch it happen and not be able to provide preventative services.
Thank you.
I know the age dropped down to 8. I've been working with a lot of like adolescent kids, so dropping that age group down to 8 is it's a really good age, I guess, because so on our tribe, majority of our kids are going through CPS during that time too. So I mean, this is going to help another program, actually another program to reach out to them, because without CPS, I think the kids are actually lost other than school, because within that 8 to 12 range, I mean, it's a big range where we got to kind of pick them up before they even get to that adolescent age too. So I think it's a big move right now. So glad it's doing it. So it'll help me out, because then I can work a little lower and kind of prepare myself actually for that age group. So
Christina?
Oh, I just wanted to add to what Andy said, that in my experience directly here in Clackamas County, and then when we've spoken about it at our Juvenile Directors Association meeting, these younger children fall into sort of this no person's land. All the agencies come to the table and say, not appropriate for child welfare. We say not appropriate for detention, not appropriate to be on probation to a juvenile department and set a young child up for what the research has demonstrated is a lifetime of very poor outcomes and multi-system use. So I'm really excited that this concept's going forward, and that we have the opportunity change the range here to support that, so that these we can, as a system, keep knowingly let children be put on a path of pretty most likely, highly likely failure and inability to later transition into adulthood because they've gotten sucked into the system. So I'm really a big proponent of that. Molly knows how I feel. We've had a lot of conversations about that, and she's been a great champion for this as well. So anyway, just wanted to share that with the group.
Thank you so much, Christina and Exan, Molly. That's really helpful. So I will move us through other required plan elements. They're not, we had a special discussion about the age range because that's the change that we're proposing as a policy direction for the council to approve. Services, the same type of services, and depending on the community need and structure, and frankly, the amount of money they're eligible to receive, it could be more than one program. That's why we have like options for plurals here. The risk assessment tool, this is how we know that youth are getting services that they need. The risk assessment tool looks like helps for case planning, but also it helps us to keep track in changes of risk factors. And that's what the evaluation is based on. Then again, the evaluation referring to is what you heard in September. And the information goes into either or both systems. One is operated by the Oregon Youth Authority Juvenile Information System through a partnership with counties. And also then the data manager is what we operate through Oregon Department of Education. And Melissa, could you move us to the next slide, please? And then there is, of course, budget. And the next two sections, evidence-based practice is a requirement also imposed on Youth Development Division by the legislature, where JCP funds are subject to, well, there's a long name for the statute, but it's used to be known as Senate Bill 267 when it became Oregon law, by which at least 75% of the JCP fund needs to be expended on evidence-based programs and practices. So we've developed an evidence-based practice checklist by which programs can be assessed whether they adhere to the principles of an evidence-based practice. So that's what we ask people to fill out when they put a plan together and submit it to the Youth Development Council so we can see whether the requirement is being met or not. But again, there's a 25% room for those who do not propose evidence-based practice. And there's a conversation to have later whether we should be subject to that law or could we maybe seek some legislative change in the future. And the cultural appropriateness is we need to make sure that the services that are being provided to the youth are developmentally appropriate, as well as the cultural strategies are proposed and described and will be implemented by the programming. And for that, we ask people to make a reference to the racial and ethnic disparities if they identify them in the data analysis based on racial RRI relative rate index reports that I referenced earlier on as a data source. And also we need to make sure that the program services will be affirming and developmentally supportive to the LGBTQ plus youth. And lastly, there needs to be shown a relationship between JCP prevention services and the JCP basic and diversion funds that are also allocated to the community. And Melissa, we're reaching the last page, I think, here. Yeah, and this is our basic plan timeline. So right now, in the current biennium, well, the grants, minimum grant is $63,000, and minimum grant is the allocation is received by all 9 tribes and 19 counties that fit into that smaller population group. Our total allocation of this in this biennium is $6,368,329.00. We do not know how much money will be appropriated for the next biennium. So at this point, we're kind of using this current allocation as a baseline for both planning and our distribution of funds. So we can talk about changing or hopefully going up higher for the minimum grant in the next biennium, because frankly, it's a small amount of money. And as for our timeline, so we plan to release the guidelines by January 16, and we will ask for the plans to be submitted by the end of March. And that will give us a couple of months for the Juvenile Justice Committee and YDC staff to review the plans, and this is important, and provide feedback as the plans come in. So we will have this ongoing communication for a couple of months. So by the time the plans are presented to the Youth Development Council on June 8th meeting, we've had this back and forth communication with counties. So I'll just say there are no surprises for anyone at that meeting. With that, I will be quiet and I will hope to receive some questions or corrections.
So, Chair, this is Molly Rogers, the Chair of the Juvenile Justice Committee, and I'm going to move to approve and accept the budget and the timeline and the planning process submitted to the YDC by the Juvenile Justice Committee. And so, if we have then we can have some discussion.
Do we have a second?
Ojiro seconds.
Tabidi, this is Melissa. I see Christina's hand is still up, but I'm not sure if that's.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay,
Thank
no,
you
that's
so
okay.
much.
Just checking.
Sorry, it's only been almost 3 years. I'm still learning. I will remove my raised hand. I didn't have a question.
Andy, were you seconding this or were you?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Actually, Zan seconded.
Oh, Zan did. Okay, I couldn't
Oh,
hear.
yeah.
Thank you, Zan.
Yeah, Zan did.
Yeah.
So,
Any questions or discussion?
Yeah.
Chair, this is Molly. I just want to really thank YDC of how collaborative and how they reached out to not just the Juvenile Justice Committee, but we asked subject matter experts to come to the table. And so we had multiple meetings outside of our regular subcommittee meeting. I just want to thank them for that.
Thank you, Molly. So shall we vote? All in favor? I guess would be by a check or raised hand.
I'll do a roll call vote. Tabidi, this is.
Oh,
Melissa.
okay, great, Melissa. All right, there we go. Sorry.
That's
Melissa,
okay.
can you do run the roll call? Sorry.
Yes, that's all right. I am ready to go. Zan Ojiro,
I vote aye.
Eric Cardella,
Aye.
Parasa Chanrami, Janine Hartley,
Aye.
Celeste Jansen, Robin Johnson, Andy Leonard,
Aye.
Tabidi Lewis,
Aye.
Adrian Livingston, Erica McAlpin, Christina McMahon,
Aye.
Maricela Ortega Guzman,
Aye.
Jeff Parker,
Aye.
Molly Rogers,
Aye.
Diana Rojas, Andy Santana May, Karen Spencer,
Aye.
Janelle Theobald,
Aye.
Liz Thorne,
Aye.
Koi Vu, Kiwi Wilson. I'm tallying these up real quick. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That is 12 votes, which is a quorum and is passing.
Well, thank you very much for the vote and for support of the guidelines as, developed by the Juvenile Justice Committee and partners and approved. I want to say a few words about our federal responsibilities as a state advisory group, and Molly, Christina, again, Sam, who was at that meeting, if you want to add something to it. So our fiscal year 21 award was finally received, and that award was contingent on modifications that had to be made to the compliance monitoring manual, which have been made, accepted by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. So the funds were received and released to us. At the same time, we received the letter that we're in full compliance for the data that Lindsay just recently submitted, and which means that we're eligible for 100% of fiscal year 22 award. Now, we don't know how much money that is, and we haven't received that award yet, but that's coming in, it's in the works. Now, at the last Juvenile Justice Committee meeting, we decided that it's time to take a closer look at our federal funding and federal responsibilities. So on February 6th, the Juvenile Justice Committee will meet, and we will go in a more detailed view of the funds, the responsibilities, and other things. Molly, did you want to add to that a little bit? And we've also had a visit from the National Council of National Governments, right? They're doing some work in Oregon on helping reform the court system, how courts process juvenile delinquency cases. And there's a connection that state advisory group, which we are, can play in that work. That's pretty much it for, and we'll have more news and maybe better sense and clearer sense of direction after the conference that we're attending next week, because that will be a direct training from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, because there have been some changes because the law changed and the administration changed. So we'll know more when we get back.
Thank you so much, Anya. Thank you for that update. I think that's very, very useful and helpful. So let's move forward. Brian and Paul will talk about the youth grants requests for applications, and then we'll, at the conclusion of their discussion and our questions, vote to approve the application process. So.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for that last vote. Thanks. We're running about 5 or 6 minutes behind, so we're going to just jump into this next piece. So, Paul, do you want to pick it up? I know there's a PowerPoint. I'm not sure who's presenting, but we'll just keep moving.
Perfect. Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. All right. Thanks, Davidi. So for the record, my name is Paul Sell. I'm the Reengagement Systems Manager and Youth Grants Lead, and I'll be presenting today about our youth grants and the 2023-25 RFA process for council approval. So next slide, please, Melissa. So I put this slide up front just so that you so the council can see where the timeline is. It's laid out with the RFA development, what's currently happening, and then you can see the next stages throughout. It's kind of someone told me yesterday it's not a stair step that they'd want to go up on, but we have our development through February. and awareness campaign and webinars through the end of March as a goal. This is all set up for a launch goal late February into March. That's what we told the council last September. So again, that's about 3 months in advance. So preparing for this, we noticed that we did the same presentation back in March. So we're right in line with our proposed goal with that. You can see the rest of it, which we can talk about later in terms of that process. But to meet some of the goals that we have, and just to share some of the goals, is one of the goals that we have is to improve the RFA schedule and outline with awards notification coming prior to or right around that June 30th date, which is when a lot of our grantees have to release their temporary staff if they don't know that they're having funding. So that is a goal that we've heard, and we're trying to meet with that. Other goals of this work is to implement the feedback and information that we're gathering through extensive community outreach and community conversations, as well as from our grantees in the YDC. So this presentation, again, will help influence some of this work. Other goals that we have is to really guide applicants to the most appropriate initiative for them in the work that they're doing, stick with our regional assignments and awards as part of our awarding process. And then a couple other things that have come up through our community conversations, which because of the vote, we wanted to put this in front, but we are having some goals to explore priority points connected to the statewide awarding process, which we'll talk about a little bit later, as well as explore some specific sovereign nation funding that again has come up through these community conversations on that side. So I'll go ahead and jump into the information about the grants, and then we'll come back to some conversation. Much of what you will see today is pretty similar to what we did in the 21-23 biennium process. So I am going to probably go through this pretty quickly. Please stop me if you have clarifying questions or other information on it. I can see probably about half the people on the screen. So, and I'll pull up chat, actually, was supposed to do that. So I do have that open if you want me to try to do some clarifying questions, but there is a summary slide at the end that we'll come back and kind of discuss the things for approval. So on the screen right now, you see kind of the presentation outline. It's broken into 3 different areas. That gold color is for review. Does not require council approval, but it's to update the council where we are with the information. You'll see that color at the top of the slide for the title. Then we move into that kind of light blue color, which is present and approve. That is the information that that's being presented today for council approval. And then lastly, that green section down at the bottom, the discuss, is where we'll kind of pull things back and wrap up. Let's see. I see Tabidi just said yes. If folks place questions in the chat, that will I appreciate that, because I'll try to monitor that as well. So you'll see me looking at my 3 screens. It's not, I'm not paying attention on that side. All right. So next slide, please. So just to remind us why we are here, our administrative rules and statute in the black lettering is really the pieces of those rules. You can see the OARs that list this requirement, but the Youth Development Division, which is the staff, will establish a process. The process must be approved by the YDC, and then the council reapproves this process each biennium. That's why you get to hear me talk about this again 2 years later. So there's another statute in there around council determining the availability of funding for community-based youth development programs. We do not have a proposed legislative budget at this point. So we're using our budget from the last biennium to kind of anticipate that. So that specific statute will come back in March once we have a better idea of the proposed funding. Next slide, please. So just to kind of point the direction, because we do have grant and aid in 2 different areas. So you can see our grant and aid. Anya just did a great presentation on the juvenile justice work that she is doing. That is one funding path of grant and aid. I should say grant in aid, not grant and aid. Sorry about that. And this conversation is really focused on our youth grants. So you can see that that's focused on supporting prevention and intervention, as well as focused on disconnected or at-risk youth disconnecting from school or work. Next slide, please. As our youth grants portfolio has expanded, wanted to just draw the council's attention to really the 4 funding streams that are under the youth grants portfolio. So those kind of dark gold ones, the Community Investment Grant and the Oregon Youth Reengagement Fund, those 2 both require YDC approval of process. Our other two funding streams, so the Future Ready Youth Programs Grant, that actually is guided by legislation and aligns with council approved process, but per that legislation does not require council approval for those grants. And then lastly, we have this, our legacy, our community schools legacy grant that is not included in this presentation. That'll be something that we'll have to have further discussion on at a later time. Next slide, please. This slide is full of information. It is similar to what you've seen before around our 4 initiatives under the community investment grants. This has really just been updated with some language as well as refining some of the focus. So Youth Promise Initiative is our largest grant that we typically offer in community investment. It supports existing programming operating continuously over the biennium. That's some specific language updates we've had because that reporting in Youth Promise can be challenging for those that are not doing continuously programming, whether it be school year or calendar year. Again, these are focused for ages 6 through 24. That was a weird age range, 6 through 24. The counterpart to Youth Promise Initiative is our Youth Solutions Grant down in that gold color. This is what supports new and existing programming. Can be continuous programming, but also the limited term. We saw quite a few different organizations this last biennium wanting to do some summer programming or some focused event programming that didn't have the reporting capabilities of a continuous program. So this allows that flexibility. Again, it serves youth 6 through 24. Just to point out, this Youth Solutions is also really our key grant for new and innovative programming, the capacity building, system change work that many of our grantees are doing. It requires less reporting requirements specific to youth. On the other side of that, we have Youth Workforce Readiness Initiative, which is going to be a little bit defined or refined moving forward as we have our Youth Readiness Grants, Future Ready Grants, excuse me. But this is for those existing programming serving youth 14 through 24 around career exploration and skills development services. And I see Melissa's going to be sending this out. So yeah, this slide is, again, a lot to take in. So this will be coming out with our materials on it. The big difference between Youth Workforce and Future Ready Funds is Future Ready Funds is focused on paid internship. So that language will be updated for this round. And then lastly, our Youth Violence and Gang Prevention Grant. That serves youth 12 through 24, specifically designed around programming for youth identified at risk of committing or being victims of violent crime. So there's some very specific programming language that will be in there. To note, typically at this point, we show the award range in these grants. We have yet to determine that. YDD staff will need to determine those award ranges once we have analysis of our budget, as well as all of the information from community conversations and the community outreach work we've done. So right now we're looking at the Promise Grants maximum range being between 200 and 300,000, which is an increase consideration due to some information we're gathering at community conversations about the inflation, and that grantees do need higher awards in those. Workforce, the top range that we're looking at is 200 to 250,000. Again, that'll be defined as we get that information analyzed once we wrap up community conversations. Solutions in Youth Violence and Gang Prevention, those are our smallest grants that we typically offer, and that top range will be around 100 to 125,000 for both of those grants. That's what we anticipate. Again, we want to do the analysis prior to that. You'll notice on the right-hand side of the slide, there is a gray box that says YDC specific information. That's just to draw your attention to where there will be some updates. Again, those updates will come around funding specifically in March, but does not require YDC approval on that. And then if we can go to the next slide, I'll pause just for general questions, but the next slide is our re-engagement work. And again, these are pretty similar grants as they have done in the prior bienniums. But the re-engagement opportunity grants, the big difference between that and our collaboration grant is opportunity grant is focused on services provided directly to eligible youth. And you can see the definitions within that. Our collaborative grant is switching to a much more focused effort on supporting collaboration and cross-sector work. So less about the service and more about the collaboration and connection of new services in a community. The opportunity grant range, what we're trying to determine is going to be between 240 and 350,000 is what we're currently thinking. We'll have to determine that once analysis has been completed. The collaborative grant, because it does not require the direct services to youth, would actually go down to $100,000 or $150,000 range for that biennium. So I'm going to pause there because I covered a ton of information and I know I'm going really fast. I see Brian smiling because he's been hearing me talk a lot at these community conversations. So it's a good sign for me to pause. Any questions at this point? All right. Not seeing any hands or questions. I see head nods. So the next slide, please, Melissa, is that general information about our funding the funding background and our 2023-25 grant and aid budget. So we're waiting on legislative approval of that budget. So a couple of things that happen within that is the funding requirements. So such as re-engagement funds have to be used for re-engagement grants, and then they'll also be designed around the initiative plans and the priorities of that. So on the screen down at the bottom, you can also see what our 2021-23 approved budget was, and the two blue text areas is the ones that we're specifically talking about, and we anticipate those remaining relatively strong with possible small increase. But again, we don't have anything that's leading us to believe that we'll have a huge increase in those funds other than just the standard cost of living and cost increase on those. Again, this will be brought back forth. So once the approved YDC, or once the legislature approves our budget for this, this will be brought back to the YDC as an update. Now we're going to jump into the part that we need YDC approval on. So the next slide, you'll notice the top changes to that light colored area. Much of this language is the same with some minor adjustments just in the current language that we've seen. But so part of the request for application or the RFA process is applicant eligibility, and that is defined within our statute and rule. You can see that community investment grants who are eligible to apply, as well as youth re-engagement. Looking to the side, just a note that we did get a question in the last RFA process about if school districts and ESDs, as well as educational entities, were considered eligible for applicants for the community investment grants. In that Q&A process, we did address that and said, yes, school districts and educational entities are able to apply for community investment grants because they fit into the category of any other local government or organization. So there may be some update language in the future for that now that we've made that commitment through our Q&A process on that. Just another note that YDC does have authority to approve others who are eligible for it. This is a pretty wide array of that in regards to those. The next slide. Oops, I need to change my slide so I can see my notes. My next slide is around application materials. Again, this stays very consistent to what you've seen in prior RFAs. The application materials will again use SM Apply or SM Apply, which is an application system for both the applications and reviews. We'll have common format across all of our grant and RFA processes with question type. The scoring rubric will remain the same across the board, as well as application processes will remain the same or as close to as the same as we can within it. Specific to the RFA and the initiatives, supplemental materials may differ between each RFA. For example, re-engagement does require that there are partnership letters submitted with the application. So that looks different from community investment grants. Application eligibility review is different because of the different supplemental materials, as well as the application question response requirements. So i.e. such as the question response length and the word count and those other pieces that applicants will be able to use. The application questions remain the same from the 21-23 biennium, focused on population, program services, service area, equity, voice, and partnerships, as well as organization description and budget narratives. And just a note over here that those materials that's what we're doing right now with RFA development. So that's a lot of work the grant managers are doing currently behind the scenes.
Hey, Paul, can I jump in real quick just for folks who may or may not know this, and maybe just a little pause if there are questions or comments. the SM Apply, which is SurveyMonkey Apply, I believe, but it's an application system, as Paul noted. We have chosen to use that system versus, and Paul or Cord or somebody just wrote, not Oregon buys. Is that correct, Paul?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So in order to apply for YDD grants, you know, people get a link and get information, but it's not hosted on the Oregon buy system. We've been doing this for years. It's not new, but just wanted to note that for folks. I guess a question I have, okay, Cord is saying that this is Cord, you're answering my question. So
yep.
You can find it on Oregon buys and it'll just link you to our SM Apply system. So thank you, Cord, because I was not sure about that. So it's not as though it's not there, but it does link to another application portal, just FYI. And remind me, Paul, the level of budget information that we asked for, I think is pretty minimal or preliminary, right? It's not, our staff have participated in other application reviews, and at this applications, at the point that somebody's submitting an application, we don't ask lots for a really detailed budget on purpose.
Correct.
We find that we want to get folks, you know, applying and get their application in, but not have them stymied by, you know, a worksheet that can sometimes be a barrier. So I don't know, Paul, if you want to comment on that.
Correct, and thank you, Brian, for that. So yes, our budget submission application is very broad. Applicants basically highlight areas into which the categories of their budget that they're requesting. So staffing is one of the categories, personnel is one of the categories. So they'd say that this amount is what they anticipate. Grantees are also able to adjust it afterwards, working with their grant manager if they're awarded. So appreciate that, Brian, on the questions. And I also want to just put out there other questions. I am watching the chat. I don't see any other questions, comments. All right, so then we're going to go ahead and move to the next slide, Melissa. And this is the regional assignments and awards. Wanted to make sure that you could see the map. This is the same regional solutions map that we used at the last regional award process. It's very similar to what we used in the 21-23 RFA process. And so again, just drawing your attention to the council that we are going to use, that we would like to use these regions to help differentiate awards. And what we anticipate is intent to award a minimum of 1 grant per RFA and region for these. So that would be 1 community investment grant, 1 regional, or excuse me, 1 re-engagement opportunity grant, as well as most future ready, because that guidance would be in the same place with that, to each of these 11 regions, should we have applications that apply. Once we do the regional award, that is when the statewide ranking happens and the priority points that we want to explore come into play. And we'll have some discussion about that, of what priority points might look like in terms of the emphasis from our guidance along the way on that. Oh, also to note, this is always a big question last time we implemented these solutions. So placement into these regions are based on a applicant's business address. There is a process that is outlined in the RFA that is under Brian's or the YDD's director's approval to move regions. And so applicants would have to demonstrate that their business address is in one area, but their primary services are happening in another region, and they can be approved to move to a different region within that work. And then this is the fun part about applications, is all of the review and the requests. So the next slides are very similar to the process that we had in 21-23. This, if you remember, we broke this presentation into 2 presentations and approvals from the council the last biennium. So this is the information that was presented in June of 2021. And so the evaluation steps and award, again, as outlined, mirror what the 21-23 RFA process look like. So after the RFA closes, YDD carries out the evaluation process in the following ways. A minimum review, qualification review is done both by ODE procurement as well as YDD staff. There's a review and scoring process by a panel of reviewers. Those are volunteers, YDD staff, ODE staff that volunteer to do that. We then convene those, so they do an independent review, and then we convene those reviewers into a panel to discuss and finalize their scores, and then award slates are developed for it. So once scores are final and ranking of applications is complete, that's when that slate of awards for each grant initiative is determined and based on available funding on that work. So the next slide then outlines the review process, the review panels. There's a ton.
Sorry, Paul.
Jeff, you have a question?
Yep.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, hey, thanks. I had a hard time getting off mute earlier. I just am curious, went to the community conversation in Corvallis, and there's this, there's an inherent tension here is that there's inflation, so we want the grant sizes to increase, but there's way more applications than there are dollars. So we would want, in some ways, want them to decrease so that we could spread that further. How does this give any flexibility downstream that the council could say, you know what, we're going to lower the maximum or lower the minimum at somehow so that we can get more organizations a little bit of money? I just don't want to, I don't want to tie our hands to that now if we don't have to, but if we have to, that's okay. I just want to put that out there that I heard that loud and clear in Corvallis.
That's a great point on that. So we do have to have a determination of awards prior to the release of the RFA. So that is a critical component of it. I would say we have not done the analysis of all the feedback of all the regions, as well as input from the council that is needed to make those final determinations. Based right now, emerging trend from those presentations in the survey that we're asking participants to take part in during the community conversation is that applicants seem, or the participants seem very open to that concept and understand that there's going to be an increase or decrease in awardees if we adjust for inflation. So that's, again, we haven't done the full analysis of that, but I think it's a good question. Also looking to Brian too. I see Tabiti, you have a hand raised maybe. Oh, okay.
Yeah, oh, proceed.
Yeah. Okay. Brian, did you want to add anything more to those awards?
I mean, Jeff, I hear you. it's like this tension, you know, of we hear from folks that larger awards would be helpful. And so even aside from the adjusting for inflation, if we make the award amounts a little bit bigger, which I guess is an adjustment for inflation, but it's also reflecting some feedback we've heard, which is, hey, our project, instead of, you know, $250, hey, a $300,000 award might allow us to have some greater impact. So we've, and particularly if we can say, yeah, give us a little larger award and then have the agreement length be not just a 2-year agreement, but maybe a 3 or 4 year agreement length. Now, again, there's a caveat there. We have the ability to make the agreement be longer than a biennium contingent on legislative approval of the dollars, right? So, but then we wouldn't have to have some organizations jump through all the hoops, you know, for an application if their actual agreement was say 3 or 4 years. Yeah, we're going to be balancing a lot, trying to make those ranges, you know, maybe improve them somewhat. And hey, you know, advocacy at a community level or by the council, just more generally about the importance of these kinds of grants, you know, is, I guess, what I would say around the money.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments? All right. So we're just about through all of the process, and we'll also have some time for discussion here coming into it. So the review and reviewer responsibilities, just you can see it outlined here. The main piece is that we build these review panels consisting of volunteers and YDD staff. They're trained in the review system, the rubric, as well as the application itself. Reviewers have to affirm they don't have conflicts of interest. And then reviewers do their own individual review, which is what is called their preliminary scores. After they do their review individually, then we do these we convene these panels where they're able to review and discuss both questions as well as deviating scores among reviewers. And then they have an option there if they want to adjust their scores based off discussion. And then they also then finalize their scores based off of that. Once that's all done, then the final scores are tabulated by YDD and ODE procurement. So a note here that I have is that with the change, which is in the next slide that we made the last biennium, council members are able to be part of the review process because you do not have to work. You do not have to approve the final slate that's done by Brian, the director, in this case, Brian. So if you're interested in being part of this review panel, it does take about 8 to 10 hours of time over approximately a month to be a part. Let Brian or myself know, and also asking YDC to help recruit volunteers to be part of those panels. And I think it's our belief as staff that the more diverse pool of reviewers we have, the better aligned we will be with Oregon in general of these reviews. So then moving to the next slide, notification of award. Again, final slate of awardees is approved by the director based on the vote at the last RFA process. The YDC will be presented with the final awards at the following meeting following that release of grant notifications. Notifications of award decision is sent to all applicants and indicates whether or not they received funding. For those applicants that are declined funding, they do have an opportunity to appeal, which is outlined in the next slide. Awesome. I already see people saying they want to review, so thank you. I'm watching the chat. I see some smiles. Thank you. And then lastly, all applicants may actually request information about their application without submitting an appeal. So I had quite a few meetings with applicants from the last biennium, as well as other grant managers, that we can set those up should people be interested in that process. Then the last slide regarding the council approval is around the appeals process. Again, this is the same process we've used in the last RFA processes. It's pretty technically laid out, just in the sense that applicants do have 7 calendar days to submit an appeal, and there's a protest of what they have to include. And then just to note that YDD and ODE will address all submitted protests in a timely manner. Being a part of that process the last go around, sometimes it requires more research than others. So we try to do it as quickly as possible to get that response out. And then after the close of the appeal process, that's when the final slates of awardees is provided to the YDC and made publicly available on our website. Whew, I think we got through that process. I can take a deep breath now. So the next slide outlines some discussion points. So you heard me reference several things, and again, trying to get the vote for YDC early on process. We have not jumped into some of the initial findings that we're having around.
Paul, do you want me to pick up
conversations? Yeah, absolutely. So I'll let you do that. Sorry, I was watching chat too. So
no, that's cool. Let's, because I know that Robin's got to bounce at 10:30, and I'm not trying to rush, because if there's feedback or questions, we want it, but I know we want to get to the vote. This piece, just wanted to present this before we go to vote, just so folks know, we have had some really good discussions and feedback around creating some kind of specific sovereign nation fund or funding. So we have a suggestion about pursuing that kind of at the committee level. We do also, the input we're getting today and around kind of funding priorities and some maybe a priority point kind of structure is something that could be really helpful. And just your general questions, right, is helpful. That's happening through today's meeting is something we always appreciate. So just, and also some clarity about where my responsibilities are, or the staff responsibilities, so that you know it and you know where those lines are. Right, the RFA development and this kind of more technical language, a lot of which Paul has just shared. We need you to approve the process, but a lot of that operational detail is what we're responsible for. Or use your feedback and input, community input, and just kind of best practices to develop some of the maybe a priority areas and point structure. Maybe refine those grant initiatives, as
Paul said, making sure that work readiness is effectively differentiated from future ready. Again, those are things that we want your input on, but are ultimately our operational responsibility. Finalizing grant agreement, maximum awards, award ranges. To Jeff's question, we want your input and reaction. I think there's probably as much art to this as anything. So we'll do our best, but again, I think it is our staff level responsibility, our operational responsibility to ultimately set those. And so we want your conversation and input today, and then we'll make that final determination. And then to implement, right, to execute the process that we've just shared, but that we are going to ask your approval for to the best of fidelity. That obviously is something that staff will follow through on. So just wanted to make sure that you kind of could see and differentiate between where we need guidance, where we're going to ask for some guidance, and then the areas where we're where our responsibility lies. The little sort of side box. Those guidance items are intended to kind of provide some direction for us, because I think having a conversation with YDC members will be really valuable. And then my responsibilities, staff responsibilities are intended obviously to implement, and we've aligned as much of this as we can at a kind of 30,000 foot level with our strategic plan, and pushing up the timeline. I'll just say it again. We gave this presentation to you last biennium in March of 2021, if my memory serves me right. We are in December. We are a quarter ahead, which, because we heard from our grantees and from others, hey, we need more time to get our RFAs submitted, and then we want you to be letting us know as close to either June 30 or July 1 whether you intend to award. Because what happened last biennium is we didn't get, some of that stuff didn't happen until the fall of 21. So we're acting more quickly, and we've done this big community engagement process that is giving us great feedback. So we're coming to you earlier, and I know it's a lot of information, but just wanted to kind of hit this piece so that you were all clear. All right, Paul.
Sounds good. The other note, kind of addressing some of the questions that came up earlier, you can see those priority areas and refining in the grant, finalize the grant agreement duration. Those are issues and pieces that we are not yet ready to make a final recommendation for, because we have to do analysis of it. But it will delay the launch of the RFAs should we not be able to bring this to the council today. So that was part of the reason why we wanted to clarify that. Thoughts, discussions on that, or do we want to move to the approval discussion? Kind of looking for Tabiti, maybe. I don't know if you want to jump in at this point as well.
Well, hey, Paul, can I, just so I could imagine some folks are like, priority areas and points, what does that mean?
Oh, perfect.
So just to clarify, and Paul, you can also jump in. We, in the last biennium, just as an example, we had a score multiplier for tribal nations, which is to say, I the exact percentage of the multiplier somebody else can say, but we actually gave a slight multiplier so that then applications from tribes were elevated, and we made multiple awards to tribes where we hadn't in the past. We had done some in the past, but we had many more awards going to tribal nations this past biennium than we had in the past. There were 3, I think, tribes that submitted each one sometimes multiple applications. So 3 different tribes had awards, some of them multiple grants. So that's one example. We have the opportunity to look at other kind of priority points and multipliers, perhaps for if you're doing collaboration. This is something we heard from our community conversations. What if we gave a little bump to those awards in a particular initiative that was doing a collaboration between, say, a community-based organization and a school district, or between an agency and some other partners. So we have the ability to give points, if you will, within our scoring rubric for some things which we would want to essentially incentivize. So that's the stuff we're looking at. We haven't figured out all the details, as Paul said, because we're coming to you a little earlier, but we want to work through some of those things to really highlight some priority areas that seem important. Robin, I see your hand, so I'll stop.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, awesome. I'm just curious. It sounds like we've gotten some feedback that folks are either suggesting or behind, supportive of. I'm just curious, is there also feedback of folks who are not in support of having extra points or bumps? Just so that we can kind of get a fuller landscape idea of how these ideas are landing from a community feedback perspective.
Rob, that's a great question. I would say the short answer is I would say yes. We're asking the question. We have not gone through all of the analysis yet of the information. So, and we kind of have that kind of in multiple areas, which is actually after this this piece. But we're asking during World Cafe for people to really express their thoughts and ideas around youth, program, community, and system building. And so we have a lot of detail into that. That's why I can't really say where that's going to be. I'd say some common themes. And so, for example, the piece about budget, I think Brian and I both have been sharing out when that concept comes to the floor in those conversations, we're saying that's the tough decision that has to happen, right? If we increase for inflation, increase to better serve specific youth through that grant, it's going to reduce the awards. And I would say generally, at least, again, not having full analysis, I think people were relatively understanding of that. Now, it can be different once we get to the competitive process. Other things of priority areas that we've heard starting to come out is around like small budget organizations. And so organizations that are just harder to compete against some of the large organizations that have systems, so that the piece around, having the capacity to apply and compete against an organization that has multiple grant writers, or it's just the executive director writing them. Also the regional scoring concept. So areas in the state that didn't typically or haven't shown grants from us in the past, they feel like that's the other message that we're starting to hear as well. But that requires further.
That's great.
Yeah, I would, Paul, I think you hit it. I think, and there's like ways that if we consider this to get specific, the sovereign nation funding, that may reduce some of the dollars we have, but it might also mitigate some of the competition that happens between tribal nations and other applicants, if that makes sense, so that we pull out, if we did this sovereign nation idea, so there's not as much competition, but it does impact our grant awards. So we're trying to balance some of the feedback. It won't all be perfect, but that's just one other quick example.
And the other piece I think is important to note that we had originally put that multiplier in at the regional awards. And so we are shifting that to the statewide awards. So it's more on the competitive, because in some regions that had distinct multipliers, it didn't allow that competition to happen, the actual regional competition award to happen because of the multiplier. So we want to find a better way to do that. I think it did meet its purpose, but it's different. Let's see. Oh, Robin and Christina both had some comments in there, so appreciate that side of those comments on the chat. Other points, questions? So I'll move us to the next slide then, Tabidi, where maybe there's some more discussion. So this next slide is a summary of what we're asking the YDC to approve. So that's the review and discuss portion of it. So we showed what the portfolio was, which is very standard to what we've done in the past, as well as the process, which outlines those bulleted items there around the materials, evaluation, notification on that process. So wasn't sure if there's any discussion around that. And then if we're ready, I can bump it to the next slide, which has some suggested action. All right. Having heard none, Tabidi, I think this is where I officially do get to stop talking and turn it over to you, because we had a couple.
Give it to Robin, actually.
Robin, oh, Robin. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Robin. I already answered your question. Sorry, my bad.
I'm gonna hold on to the vote, hopefully, but I don't. I actually have to go like in 5 minutes, so I think I'm gonna hand it over to Tabidi. He knows that he's still at the helm. Thank you both.
And I see that Molly has a hand raised as well. So.
Right, I know that there are time limitations, and so Molly Rogers, and I'm actually going to make the motion so that we can get it on the discussion because I don't want to lose quorum. So I recommend or move to approve the 2023-2025 YDD grants RFA process as presented, including applicant eligibility, application materials, evaluation, award notification, and the appeal process.
Do we have a second? Or is there any further questions, discussion? And if not, do we have a second?
Ogerow will second.
Okay. So with that said, Melissa.
All
you
right.
wanna run the roll call?
Yes, thank you. Zan Ogerow,
Aye.
Eric Cardella,
Aye.
Parasa Chanrami, Janine Hartley,
Aye.
Celeste Jansen, Robin Johnson,
Aye.
Andy Leonard,
Aye.
Tabidi Lewis,
Yes.
Adrian Livingston, Erica McAlpin, Christina McMahon,
Aye.
Maricela Ortega Guzman,
Aye.
Jeff Parker,
Jeff, that's aye.
Molly Rogers,
Aye.
Diana Rojas, Andy Santana May, Karen Spencer. Was that an aye, Karen? I think you're still here. Yep. Okay, I see you.
That was an aye. Yeah, sorry about the little froggy throat.
Thank you. Janelle Theobald,
Aye.
Liz Thorne,
I vote yes.
Koi Vu, Kiwi Wilson. All right, I will total that up, but that does, the ayes have it. Thank you.
So.
Right.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Taviti. Yep.
No, yeah, thank you. So can we also, I'd like to move to assign a YDC committee or work group to be determined to further review and discuss possible next steps on a specific sovereign nation funding.
Second.
I'll do it again. Second, Ogerow.
There was somebody else who jumped in before you, Zan.
Sounded like Liz.
Was it Liz? There you go. Was that you, Liz?
I was going for it and Zan beat me.
Well, no, I think you got in under the nose.
Did I
Let's
get it?
put this on the
Great.
record.
I second.
Thank you so much. Are there any further questions or discussions before we move to a roll call?
Tabidi, this is Molly. I just want to clarify who's going to assign the YDC committee or work group. Will we ask staff to do that or anyway?
Okay, that's a good question.
That is a good question. I was thinking, I'm just gonna throw this in just because I know I was like, maybe the equity disparity group or the policy rules research group. Equity disparity group has been talking about land acknowledgement, tribal, sort of broader tribal nation recognition, action and commitment. So that seemed like the group, Molly. But I think it would be good as this motion for us to actually make the assignment so that we don't have to beat around the.
So I don't know that we need to change the message or the motion, but I would just, that helped me understand that piece. So that makes it work for me.
Okay.
Could those groups work together, Brian?
Yeah, or members of those groups.
Or members of those groups work together to do that. That way you get policy and equity happening at the same time. I mean, not that there's no policy with equity, but if there are any.
We could have a joint committee meeting or something. Yes. It would be my experience, and maybe staff would echo this, like getting multiple voices in this conversation could be really helpful. It would be then onto staff for us to just say, here's when the meeting is. We could invite members of both. Show up. There'll probably be 2 or 3 meetings between now and March. And if that's the wish of the council, I think we can make that work.
That makes sense to me because otherwise I fear we're going to try to create another meeting or another committee and a whole nother schedule and doodle poll and all of that. And that's a lot. So I think if we open it up and let folks know the agenda item and when it'll be and that we're inviting, again, multiple perspectives, one or the other meetings, that would streamline it for me.
Okay. Does that make sense? So a joint kind of committee, we'll call it actually just a work group to be made up of members of those two committees.
Okay. Okay. So we have a second for that with the clarity. And Melissa, I will allow you to move through the roll call.
All right. Zan Ojiro,
Aye.
Eric Cardella,
Aye.
Parasa Chanrami, Janine Hartley,
Aye.
Celeste Jansen, Robin Johnson,
Aye.
Andy Leonard,
Aye.
Tabidi Lewis,
Aye.
Adrian Livingston, Erica McAlpin, Christina McMahon,
Aye.
Maricela Ortega Guzman,
Aye.
Jeff Parker,
Aye.
Molly Rogers,
Yes.
Diana Rojas, Andy Santana May, Karen Spencer,
Sorry, slow on the unmuting. Aye.
thank you, Karen. Janelle Theobald,
Aye.
Liz Thorne. See if Liz is.
Couldn't find my mute button. Yes, I vote yes.
Liz, thank you. Koi Vu, Kiwi Wilson. All right, that also is 13 ayes, which surpasses quorum. So we're good on that. Thank you.
Awesome. So just a note that we'll bring the funding request and approval to the March meeting once we know more. I had that as just a note to call out to Tabidi.
Okay, outstanding. Thank you so much. So Cord and Brian will move us through discussion of the legislative and director's update and discussion.
We're going to do community engagement.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I jumped too far, didn't I? Oh, okay. Maybe I want the meeting to end, and that's not. And I'm trying to push us forward too fast. No. Okay. Yes. Community engagement. Sorry, Brian. Brian.
Yeah, no, it's Paul and I think I don't know if we're a little behind. We can
adjust.
We can adjust, and Paul kick us off, and we'll try to keep this tight.
Sounds good. And so we'll adjust a little bit on it, but again, for the record, Paul Self from the Youth Development Division with Brian Detman talking about our community engagement updates. So Melissa, if you want to bump to the next slide, and I will at this point kind of say, hey, it would be great to have the YDC members that have been able to join some of these events, maybe share out some ideas. But on the screen, you can see the list of 10 in-person events and a virtual event to be held here soon as well, that we've hosted throughout the state. We have one remaining in person, which is the West Metro. We shared that link a little earlier in there. You know, it's been quite a tour. I think ultimately and every conversation is completely different, yet landing on very similar needs around it. So just a couple of things that I feel inclined to point out, and then I'd love to have some of our YDC members jump in. We've had upwards of 365 people that registered for these events through Corvallis. That does not include the West Metro. We averaged right around, again, this is just kind of mental math and observation, around 70% attendee rate from those registrations. So I think we've seen about 250 people join us at these different events on it. And every place we've gone, we've typically had other hosts, we've had people helping host it, from current grantees to tribes to ESDs, and the latest one down in Roseburg by the community college. So it has been great forming of partnerships along the way, and just some really cool messages that have come out on it. If you want to jump to the next slide, Melissa, and this is where I really asked for, oops, why did that do that? There must be a, maybe hit it again. Should come up. There, you keep hitting This has an automation. I stole it from a different slide deck. I fully have to now admit. All right, there we go. So just I tried to summarize a few of the things that we've heard and what we've experienced as some of this work. So you can see those on the screen around just gathering input and feedback. I think people have been super open to it and really willing to share. The network and the connection that has been being made is really quite an experience. There's a lot of people that still haven't seen each other post-COVID, so there's a lot of hugs and hellos, but also just that engaging conversation around it. And I think one of the things that has been really exciting to me is just the positiveness that we've heard about youth serving organizations and their work with youth in the communities has really been, it's enlifting every time we leave one of these conversations, just to hear about the great things that are happening. But I'm going to stop talking for a second and see if there's some YDC members or Brian that would like to share out some of the experiences that have had opportunities to join us.
I'm happy to chime in, Paul, if that's all right. This is Eric. I attended the recent community conversation in Corvallis, which was pulled in both basically folks from the Mid-Valley. We had Corvallis, Albany. We actually had some folks, I believe, from over Lebanon, Sweet Home side, as well as Lincoln and out to the coast. So don't quote me, but I think it was 30 plus people that showed up, which was a good turnout. The dialogue was really rich, and I really appreciated the staff going through just kind of like framing, what is this work? What's the history of this work? Where are we going from here? I would say what I was struck most by, and I would invite Jeff or Zan, who also attended that session, to chime in, was I think I was expecting to have a lot of current grantees and, primarily like nonprofit, prospective grantees. I think what we saw was, and I was actually pleased, is representation from DHS, Department of Human Services, the county. We had HEC, at least one Higher Education Coordinating Commission representative, some community college folks, both Oregon Coast Community College as well as LBCC. And really the conversations that were happening were a lot about how can we leverage some of these dollars to create new partnerships. There was a lot of conversation about sub grantees, or a lot of talk about collective impact, at least at my table. So I know that we've already kind of voted about the next biennium of funding, and there will be a task force or a new committee to look at kind of prioritizing or +1 point kind of criteria for particularly for sovereign nations. I think that there was also a lot of interest in somehow incentivizing, or at least having marketing to kind of really talk about how we welcome multi-agency or multi-partner type of projects. Those have been part of the council for a while, or the youth development division staff know we in the past have had a very formal kind of collective impact or MOU model. We currently do for our regional or our re-engagement kind of collaborative grants. I was surprised to hear it, because I think while we were doing that, several years ago, I think there was a lot of consternation that was maybe shared about mandating partnership as part of the process. So I was happy to hear that there was an emphasis on partnership, and I was happy to see that the community conversations included other agency representatives and folks that work in other systems that potentially could leverage support, whether that's financially or even as grantees or just as partners. So well done to the YDD staff, and thanks to those council members who showed up as well. I'll be very excited to see what the roll up of some of the themes of the feedback would be. One other thing that came up in one of the breakout or World Cafe sessions is a question about what would those kind of conversations look like with a youth audience, if we actually had more voices. So Janelle, you're here today, and I really appreciate your being here to learn and absorb and observe. I think it would be an excellent opportunity if at some point we could have either virtually or in person some opportunity for community conversations, brainstorming input directly from youth constituents, whether that's through our grantee base or even in communities. So I'll stop from there and open up to others.
Hi, this is Sam. I had the privilege of attending 2 sessions, one in the Dalles and one in Portland. And and then the numbers varied, but it was unique. Like, for instance, like the Dalles had the session in the Dalles had a different vibe from the session in East Portland. And I felt like the YDD staff did an excellent job. And the vibe that I got was everybody was appreciative of the YDD efforts and staff, and they wanted to contribute and offer suggestions on how to make the process better. And at the Dalles too, I was pleasantly surprised. There were people not only from Wasco County, but from Hood River and other counties there. So yeah, so it was, and of course, that was the first time I went to the community college up on the hill, which is very nice. So yeah. But then I'm just saying and I guess next time in a few years or next year, if you have an opportunity to go visit multiple sites to see how it's very regionalized, their desires and some of the challenges that they face and so forth. Yeah. So and then I'll just leave it there. And then at the Dalles workshop, one of the participants educated us on the definition of frontier. Remember that, guys? Like on the number of people in square footage or whatever. I'm not square miles and stuff like we did. Oh, sorry. I'm just being honest. Yeah.
Sam, I've actually used that definition at everyone following since then, I think so. Other thoughts from council members who joined us? Hey, Jeff, looks like you might have your hand raised. I don't know if that's for this or not.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. It was I just wanted to echo what Eric said in terms of the gathering in Corvallis. And what was interesting there, I wish I had attended more than one now, but Corvallis is uniquely in the southern Willamette Valley, but it drew practitioners from the coast, from kind of the suburban area in and around Corvallis, Eugene, and maybe even Salem, and then some urban population. So it had this really great mix of all different types of providers. And overwhelmingly, I think the message was of gratitude. Thank you for hosting the conversation. But I think the other thing, like all of us, we're very hungry to see what the sort of the thematic results are that come out of it. I thought it was great. I give just a ton of props to the team for pulling it off. I know it's a major ordeal to go on the road and do the road show, but I think the value is going to be fantastic.
Thank you, Jeff. I know we're a bit on time too, so. Brian, did you want to add anything before we kind of wrap this up? There's a couple emergent themes and stuff on the next slide, but.
Yeah, just appreciate the council members who were able to be there. The one thing I'll add is in the Dalles, in Pendleton, in Ontario, and in Roseburg, we did, and frankly in Medford, we did have a chance to meet with or engage in some way with young people, right? So we went to the Norcor, the detention facility in the Dalles, and met with a group of young people after we had our community conversation. In Medford, we actually had a youth from the Umatilla tribes actually open the meeting. It was, he's 22, 20, wonderful. I've since had a follow-up conversation with him, say, hey, do you want to be on our council? In Medford, we got to visit in Ontario. In Ontario, we got to meet staff from the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization, and some of those staff were, on the younger end, having grown up in the Ontario area. In Medford, we met with youth from this group Project Plus, and then in Roseburg, we met at folks with the Phoenix
school there. It's a charter school. So to that point of Eric's, we're seeking ways to engage with young people. We've had some follow-up emails and conversations with folks. Come talk to this advisory group. Oh, hey, come talk to tribal youth council, et cetera. So we've had some good ways to engage. Again, I know we're short on time, but that's just my one other add, and we will continue that kind of engagement. We're about 10 minutes behind. So Paul, why don't you get to that piece and then we'll move to Cord and me. I don't know if we need a break or not, but I'll.
Sounds good.
Well,
yep. Sorry.
Would it be okay if Paul, because I think this community component is important, if maybe you quickly made whatever comments you were going to make, then we could go to a break, and then Cord will then we'll try and see how we track ourselves in that way. Is that okay? All right.
I think that makes sense to be maybe a little break, and then Cord and I can try to do our piece. And
yeah, you and Cord. I'm sorry, Brian.
No, it's all good. All good. Yeah.
So another piece I'd add, so you saw the schedule of posted events that we advertised and did Eventbrite registrations and the whole deal. Inside of those, where we were traveling, we specifically did outreach to the tribal nations and the sovereign nations as we went through the area. So we met with Umatilla, and they actually hosted us for the event, as Brian alluded. And so we had meetings with members from their tribal council, along with, we've met with Warm Springs, Cow Creek, and Klamath thus far. So that is a piece that isn't necessarily in our list of events, because it's very specific to where we're going. And so that is on Brian's and my to-do list, and why you're also seeing this message around researching sovereign nation funding. That's been a pretty solid message from meeting with the tribes, and so more to come on that. And that work will continue past these events, just scheduling wise on it. So community insight, again, those that took part, we tried to add a few different opportunities. We purposely did the lunch or somewhat of a social time to allow networking of organizations, and that has been just a wonderful experience, just to sit down and chat with organizations when we're not presenting. That's always nice, but also to just that information. But give you an idea of who's attending. You can see that on the screen with leadership. We've actually had a lot of frontline and direct service staff, as well as a lot of that staff, that frontline staff, are also management as well. So I think it's been a really good mix. Emerging themes, again, just incredible programming serving youth throughout Oregon, but there's some needs definitely that are starting to surface. So the need for accessible services and supports, mental health treatment services, and trauma supports are definitely emerging on that side. Challenges around hiring and finding staff and retaining staff, hence why we are trying to push this timeline ahead, as well as limited access to stable and affordable housing. It's a question we've been asking, and it's quite shocking when you start hearing about that. Not necessarily our lane sometimes in terms of providing that housing, but again, seeing that as a challenge along the lines with that. But then, again, trying to just keep that in that focus of that community hope and commitment to serving youth has been incredibly high. And people wanting to show us what's happening and talk about that work. So pretty excited. And then you can see the emerging priorities that we've outlined as part of our goals. Again, I'm excited to see what that looks like in wrap up. So then the last slide, Melissa, for this is just, again, we have 2 remaining conversations. So if you can join us for the West Metro, we'd love to have you. That is on Monday. The link is on our website. Melissa shared it in the chat. Yeah. And then the virtual one, that link will be coming out. I'm assuming Melissa will probably send that directly out to all council members so they can have that link if you're able to join us. That's going to just be a modified version of these community conversations. The analysis, that probably looks very similar to what we had in the process of our decision making. So that's the same on there. And then the wrap up, which you've heard us talk a little bit about, this community conversation wrap up event, that is going to be a virtual statewide event on Tuesday, January 10th, that will, after taking a look at the analysis and really the trends, Brian and I will be back online to share kind of our thoughts and what that looks like. So again, would love to have all the council members part of that work as well. When will the registration link go live? Yes, thank you, Eric, for that. So that will go live after we start the last in-person. Brian and I purposely wanted to make sure to keep the focus on in-person. We're seeing that value. And so we're not trying to be sneaky about it, but we also just really want to encourage in-person attendance. And then we'll roll this out to virtual on Monday, the 12th, in terms of that link. I believe it's Monday, right? Melissa is when we're sending it out? Okay, perfect. Other than that, thoughts, questions? Tavidi, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, let's, are there any?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I appreciate that timing makes perfect sense. You don't want to send out the Zoom link if you're trying to get people to show in person. My recommendation would be, let's include folks who attended the other sessions. I know you said we had about 70% turnout. Maybe there's an opportunity to re-engage and say, hey, if you missed us, join the virtual. And, you know, I would say for myself, I can't speak for the other council members, if we could get that link sooner than later, that would help us also promote and get some of our networks to potentially show up on the 20th. But thank you for all the work.
Absolutely. And yes, Melissa and I are working on that, I think, this afternoon. So more to come. We'll try to get that as soon as we can. All right. I get to stop talking, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So, okay, let's say in 5 minutes, that's about 11:03, Cord and Brian, legislative and directors updates and discussion. Okay. All right, let's take a break. Okay. So, hello, everyone. Why don't we sort of pick up for our next item, which is the legislative and directors update. So, Cord and Brian.
All right, I think we're ready to go. Good morning, everyone. This is Cord Bucher, Deputy Director for Youth Development Division. I'll talk a bit and then I'll be passing it over to Brian later in the presentation. Melissa, can we go to the next slide? I am going to start off by telling you all about Future Ready Youth programs. I know we've shared some information with the council about this and wanted to provide an update on the first round of Future Ready funding. Next slide, please. So just as a quick primer or reminder, the Future Ready Oregon legislation was something that originated in Governor Brown's Racial Justice Council Workforce Work Group back in fall of 2021 and turned into legislation that was passed in the session last spring. That provided over $200 million in new funding for workforce training programs for adults and young people. Most of it went through the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, but YDD got a portion for youth programs. It's $10.5 million. A bit of that is general fund state dollars that we're currently granting now. And there's also a portion that is federal COVID relief funds, or ARPA funds, that we have but plan to retain. Our request in our upcoming budget is to carry that money forward and spend it next biennium. And that has been the plan, along with our partner agencies, to save that federal money and use it in the next 2 years, since it has a longer expiration date than state general fund. And the legislation tasks the division, the youth program sectional legislation calls on the division to administer grants and provide some direction on the priorities and the required services that we are to fund. And then there are some requirements on reporting, which we do through the Higher Education Coordinating Commission to the legislature. There is no council action required in the legislation. However, we wanted to keep you all apprised of the work happening here and talk about ways it aligns with the other YDD and YDC grants. Next slide, please. A quick overview of what these grants are meant to do. So in our youth programs grants, we're requiring essential employability skills training. So you'd call that soft skills or the other sort of fundamental skills that any young person would need in order to be successful in training or the workplace. We also expect everyone to be providing responsive and supportive services to help young people access and engage fully in training and work experiences. And then the grant requires that a program provide one of the 3 following core activities. So In addition to providing the basic level of training and support, you should also be providing a paid work experience to youth, so minimum wage level employment for a young person, or job placement and coaching, so working with other local employers to help young people access jobs, helping young people to apply, interview, get jobs, and retain them through that coaching piece. And the other option would be to help young people work towards industry recognized credentials for a viable career pathway. And so these are a little different from the workforce readiness grants that we've done in community investments in the past, where there's more of a focus, particularly on providing paid work experience as part of what we're going to support. Just to recap the milestones so far in this. So we've designed the initial application and carried out the RFA for Future Ready. That RFA process started back and we've just submitted the first report to the legislature through HEC. That is just an overview of our implementation and our initial slate of applicants and the process going forward. And I think probably most exciting for me and maybe everybody, we've hired a Future Ready analyst. It was a prolonged search, but we're really excited to welcome Sally on board. And she joined us a few weeks ago and is really doing an amazing job of absorbing a lot of this work and taking it on. So one other thing I didn't mention on here is that given that this project was something that Governor Brown was really passionate about, alongside all of this, we've been updating the governor directly on a monthly basis through, I believe November was the last time we did that. And now as the governor is leaving office, we don't expect to continue to have a one-on-one audience, but it's been really exciting, but also really kept us on our toes needing to be able to answer the governor's questions about this project. But it just indicates like how much of a priority that this was for Governor Brown to really get this funding out there and to make this impact. So I figured I should mention that. And the next slide, please. And then I wanted to update everybody on the grants that we've made so far. So here is sort of just an overview of the application and award process. So we had 54 applications come in, 51 were eligible, and of those, 26 applications were awarded. 9 of the Future Ready Youth Programs awardees have never been funded by YDD or ODE, although I think one is going to be using a fiscal agent who is a ODE funding recipient, but they're new to us. And the total awards, I think that 3.1 is incorrect. I believe it's actually 3.3 million. Actually, the 3.3 million may include administrative costs. I got to go double check that. But I know that we had 6.7 million in requests. And we use the regional award process, the same one that Community Investments has used for the last few years. And we had 10 of the 11 regions represented in our applications. And so awards were made in 10 of the 11 regions in the state. The only region we did not receive an application from was, I believe, what's referred to as the Greater Eastern Oregon region. So we did make an award that's serving Union County, which I believe is the far northeastern region on that map. And we are doing some additional outreach of continue to try to see if we can drum up interest everywhere in the state, but certainly in places where we did not get applications. Next slide, please. One of the things that I think is really critical to the design of Future Ready is that there are priority populations that were identified, that the focus is on populations or communities that historically have been underserved by workforce training programs and or who have not benefited, particularly in times of recovery. As the economy really crashed as a result of COVID, the impacts were felt unevenly, and as the economy has recovered, the rebound has been felt unevenly as well. And so that was really a big consideration for this, is who's not being lifted by the rising tide. We want to get all boats there. So this was a big focal point, and we asked our applicants to identify priority populations that they are serving. I would say I've got an asterisk there. You can see this is based on the boxes that were checked essentially in the application saying these are populations we served. Of course, we asked questions about who they're serving in more detail and how they provide cultural specific or responsive programming. But as you can see, every grantee is serving one or more priority populations shown here. The two that did not indicate serving communities of color are two that are located in rural areas where there are a very small number of non-white youth. But my understanding is, after reading their application and learning more about their program, is they actually do serve youth of color. And so I think that even that one should be 100%. And some of these, I would again say that these are based on attestation. However, one that I thought was really interesting is that a lot of programs identified individuals experiencing age discrimination. That was meant to indicate folks who, because of their older age, were experiencing age discrimination. But of course, these are youth programs. And what we ascertained is that this is kind of an indication to the fact that young people often face a different type of age discrimination when they're seeking employment. I mean, I can sort of say that when I've seen testimony, say, to the legislature about youth employees, folks talk about their inability to hire or to retain youth employees in a way that very much puts the blame on young people, in a way that other populations would certainly not get it. And I think that that is really what folks are getting at, is that we want to work with young people and help them build these skills because they face discrimination based on their age. And so that was not the intention of the priority population in the statute, but we really felt that we needed to call this out as something that youth face and that these youth programs are trying to address. So one thing we'll be doing in reporting is getting more clarity about specific populations served by grantees and how they are doing that well. And we're going to be refining how we collect this information in subsequent applications, but I wanted to share this information. And then the next slide, we added, these are not priority populations that were identified by the legislature, but there were questions that we got in a hearing after Future Ready passed about, well, how are you serving youth experiencing homelessness and youth in the foster care system? And we did a few things as a result of those questions. We did some outreach to really try to attract more applications from organizations that serve these populations of young people. And I think we had some success. I think that's part of the reason for the number of new organizations we funded. We also asked all of the applicants to identify if they were serving these youth. And as you can see, the majority are. There is some overlap here, but almost, I mean, the vast majority of these grantees are serving youth experiencing homelessness. Some are specifically focused on that population of youth, but I think just about every youth serving program is working with youth who are experiencing that situation. So just something that we want to capture data on because we think it's important. And certainly in the future, it's something we could be talking to the legislature about when these questions about priority population emerge. I'm going to pause really quickly. I just see a comment, but it looks like, Christina, you have to go. Thank you for letting us know and joining us. Any questions so far about process, application, these things? And if not, I'll just keep it moving and talk about our awards. Got a snapshot here of a few programs. A couple of these are organizations that YDD has funded previously. But several of them are organizations that have never applied for or been funded by YDD before in a grant. So I wanted to put this in here. I'm not going to read through these given the time, but I know the slide deck will get shared, and I encourage you to take a look at this. The following slide is actually a list of all of the conditional awardees. We have not published this list. I'm working with procurement on this. They've asked us, at least this is maybe a new practice, to wait on publishing lists of awardees until all the grant agreements are in place, which is reasonable practice. We are right now in the process of making grant agreements. I know that several organizations are now at the point of if they haven't received a grant agreement, they should be any day. Our procurement folks have been working hard to get all the insurance requirements collected and get the agreement set up for all of these. So this is the list, but I foresee this being the final list. And so once it is finalized, we'll publish it to our website. But we wanted to share it here, as we've also shared it with the legislature. And some of these you can tell where they are located, but essentially, again, representation throughout the state. Quickly talk about some of the successes. I mean, one of the really unique things about this grant is the level of collaboration with other state agencies. We're working very closely with HEC in particular around reporting, around our planning. We're actually working on some meetings to increase alignment in the structure of our grant agreements, requirements, particularly on insurance. We feel good about our applicant pool. We feel good about who our applicants are serving. We think the focus on these core activities has resulted in stronger applications, better service models for young people. Large portion of the awardees are new grant recipients. The regional awards, again, I think this has been a really effective improvement to our grant making process since we've implemented it. And we did some things in the application process that I think reduced work for applicants and reviewers, some additional training tools. We did not require a budget to be submitted unless an applicant was going to be awarded, which is different from the other grants. We did get some positive feedback on that. I could talk more about it another time if folks are curious, but that was something we wanted to try and we think it worked well. We also did additional screening before we sent applications to reviewers, which I think was really helpful. So these are just some of the things that I think we're going to retain. Next slide, I think, is next steps. So there are some things in that blue box that we want to introduce. I will definitely say some of these ideas are things that were generated by, I know Sally has already had some really fantastic contributions to how we can improve things. So next time we update you on Future Ready, I believe Sally will probably be the one doing it. And we're really excited about that. But right now we're working on executing grant agreements. We're implementing what we've learned to improve for the next round. And our goal is to launch this RFA alongside the others that you voted on earlier. So we're going to align this with the other grants. We're working on how this would connect with those and differentiate from them. So still a lot of work to do over the next few months, but we're really excited about how this is rolling out, the impact it's going to have. And we're looking forward to being able to report on the success of these programs. I think that's the end of the Future Ready section. Go to the next slide. Yep, I'm going to pause. If there are any questions or comments on Future Ready. And I think if not, we can go to the next slide, and maybe Brian, you, I believe, might be taking over from me for this part.
I think so. I see this first bullet point has a January XX date. I think that's January 9th, isn't it, Court?
I think it is. Yeah, I meant to go back and put that in there and was like, oh, I'll get back to this.
No worries. So I just wanted to, we had a good executive committee meeting about a month ago, or more or less. And I know folks have dropped off. So we kind of got a small meeting at this point. But those that have remained, we appreciate it. We want to just kind of hit some things that I think you all may be wondering about as it relates to the gubernatorial transition and kind of broader just political landscape. So that's the purpose of this, trying to anticipate some questions. So again, thanks for those people who are sticking with us. I believe Governor-elect Kotek takes office through a ceremony. I think it's on the 9th. But that's an important date because up till that point, she's in a governor-elect role, and we're sort of closing out work with Governor Brown's team. I mean, shoot, that's only what two and a half, 3 weeks away. But some work has already started in terms of transition. The education policy team is yet to be determined. I've been on a couple of calls over the last couple of weeks with agency directors about, what the timeline is and who's it going to be. Are folks from Governor Brown's team going to continue? I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch and see. We'll just keep our ears and eyes peeled. We'll let you know once we know as those things take shape. The governor-elect will be working on a recommended budget expected in late January, early February, so that the ideas that the agencies requested budgets are going to Governor-elect Kotek's team, and then with that, the governor-elect will develop a recommended budget. So again, we're staying tuned. We're staying in contact with folks as much as possible, but just understand that's a key process step that's usually happening in this fall, early winter, but it's going to happen after the first year given the election. So just support for our legislative concept and concepts is yet to be determined. This is, which is to say whether the governor supports some of the sort of technical fixes that we want to make with our statutes around the YDD and YDC. Not sure yet if the governor, but we need governor support for our legislative concept around some of those statutory changes to be accepted. We have a policy option package, a POP around adding some staffing to our juvenile crime prevention team. Don't know yet if the governor elect and her team will support that, but we'll do our best to educate around those things, but need the leadership at the governor's office to advance either that legislative concept or our policy option package. And again, Janelle, a bunch of new words and ideas here. Happy to talk offline so you can to bring you up to speed. We'll do some orientation work with you, Janelle, just so we can kind of introduce some of these ideas in a little more detail. One other note that I just wanted to make as it relates to this gubernatorial transition is just issues we're hearing. You heard Paul talk about some of these things, so I just want to echo. There's a lot. I think there's some opportunity and just conversation around the mental health crisis, which is to say there aren't frontline providers and therapists and counselors at the school and community level. Just the general coming off of COVID, how can we better support young people who, as they're coming out of virtual school into real school, or the opportunity to stay in virtual schools, just the needs and the social emotional needs of young people need to be attended to. And it's not just at the youth and young people, it's at a community level. A big issue again, but certainly we're doing what we can to raise that issue in the conversations we have. Janelle, thanks for the comment. Yeah, a lot of new stuff. Not to worry, we're here to help you through it. And so just sticking with us. Interagency work is a thing that we've heard here and there from the community conversations. How do we partner with Oregon Health Authority? How do we stay connected to Department of Human Services and Child Welfare, Higher Education, Coordinating Commission, Employment, WorkSource, Bureau of Labor and Industry, and those are some partners in the Future Ready work. But I think Oregon Youth Authority, I think there's opportunity for us as a smaller agency to be kind of a connective tissue. So we'll work on that, and then focus on schools and bringing attention to those school environments that are supporting the most vulnerable youth, whether those be alternative schools, charter schools, et cetera. Just interesting for us to be in a conversation. Some of those organizations are grantees, and they seem consistent with what we're hearing about the governor's priority. I can't predict the future, but I think there's some alignment that seems very possible, and we'll keep pushing for that. Next slide. As it concerns the legislative session, I said this: governor's support for our legislative issues is to be determined. I note this below that there's other legislation that I think will impact our work. I have a couple of examples of that below. We are working on connecting with legislative champions and legislators. So Cord and I and other staff we've had a chance to had, Senator Hansel was at our Pendleton community conversation, which was great. And then we've had some outreach from Representative Gomberg and his office. And, those are just a couple of examples of legislators who've kind of been in contact with us around the community conversation. So we'll continue to follow up with those folks. A couple of bills that we're watching. One, which was alluded to in the Juvenile Justice State Advisory Group conversation around establishing a minimum age for referral to juvenile court, making perhaps that minimum, officially that age at 12 is something that is being discussed. And so we're watching that. And then also, again, as was referenced earlier in the meeting around designated funding for counties to serve youth under 12, that money perhaps being attached to juvenile crime prevention funds and potentially administered by YDD. Nothing has been determined around that, but we'll just kind of watch as those ideas percolate. I don't know if Molly, if you're still on, if you want to add anything else to those, or Zan, you've heard some of this stuff before too. Just any comment y'all want to make, welcome at this point, but I think we hit some of this earlier.
Yeah, thank you. This is Molly Rogers, and we did hit it earlier. So I think we referenced it in the funding and the reduction of the age for the JCP prevention fund. So thank you.
Thanks, Molly. And then we are, last point, just kudos to Court and other staff, other supervisors who are going to be kind of feeding information. We are working on preparing our budget presentation, which will go to the Education Subcommittee of the Ways and Means Committee, that we anticipate that we would present in the March-April timeframe, but we've got a December deadline. I think it's in the next week or so for a draft, an early draft of our budget presentation. Again, we'll have some time in the new year to kind of refine and clean that up, but we are working on our budget presentation that then we'll have at least a couple of, education subcommittee presentation. I don't know, I think we sometimes are asked to also show up to Ways and Means. So that's just something we're working on just as a FYI, but that is an opportunity then once we get in front of those committees for the council members to just show up and be in the audience at a minimum, but also sign up for testimony or submit a letter. They tend to be pretty packed committee meetings, I'll just warn you. And they don't, they happen at 7:30 in the morning, or sometimes they happen at 5 or 6 at night. Things will be in person, so keep that in mind. We are presenting also alongside and within the Oregon Department of Education budget. So our piece tends to be, 10, 15 minutes of talking. And maybe again, there's chance for testimony here and there, or like I said, a letter. But there's not a ton of talking, but Court and I will be in contact if there's a way to get a grantee to show up to a committee, or better yet, even a young person to sort of speak about the important work. The interactions we've had in the community conversations, maybe we can, encourage or invite some of the folks we've had a chance to communicate with while we've been on the road. So we'll be working to kind of execute on that in the coming, in the new year. Any questions about the legislative session, or Court, anything you'd want to add?
Sure, a couple of things I would maybe mention. One is that this session is planned to be in person. The legislature intends to return to the historic way of doing things, where all the hearings are in person. Something that happened as part of the budget process was there were special hearings just for public comment, and there would be a designated day when we could invite YDD grantees or other advocates to go and provide testimony. In fact, doing that was one of the ways I found out about the YDD job that I eventually was able to attain. So, I came to testify about YDD funding that my then employer was receiving in the work we were doing with young people. So I know that historically has been an opportunity, and we can definitely share more information about that once the schedule becomes clear. That schedule also seems to wobble a bit. Even our days that we will be presenting, you know, our governor's recommended budget, usually they change it once or twice just because we're in the middle of a very long set of presentations from the Department of Ed. And then one other thing I was going to mention, we didn't put it here, but I figured it's worth just noting. Some folks may be aware that the city of Gresham got emergency funding in December of 2021, and they actually got a $2 million grant for the East Metro Outreach Prevention and Intervention Grant. So it's a large city-run youth violence prevention program that they asked, they basically requested for YDD to administer it. And so Abraham Magana and I have been working with them to get that set up. That was one-time emergency funding. I have the understanding that Gresham is going to pursue that. We are neutral on that. It's not something that we expect to be, you know, to be asked to support by the governor's office. And it's ultimately something that really is Gresham's project. But we would certainly be, you know, if we are asked to continue in the role that we're in, that's something we may do. So it is legislation that could involve YDD, but it's a good example of something that impacts us, but we're not necessarily advocating for. But I just thought that, you know, I'd share that as something I know maybe on the horizon. There's also rumors of legislative action on insurance requirements for folks that have been privy to that discussion. We don't know yet what that might look like. There was a lot of activity, a lot of discussion already about this among agencies, but I would not be surprised if there is some legislation that attempts to tackle this and bring clarity to how insurance requirements impact grantees and small organizations. So there might be some really interesting things on the horizon. I believe the next council meeting will be in the thick of session, but we'll work on, I believe in the past, we've done some legislative update emails in addition to the council update here. And so we'll plan to provide you with an update of what legislation we're watching we think impacts our work once we know more.
Thanks, Cord. Yeah, and we are part of a work group conversation around the insurance requirements, just so folks know. I think a date is being set around that, but sort of bringing what we've heard through community conversations and frankly what we've heard from many of our grantees for a number of years, we're able to kind of raise those questions and issues as that work group is going to start to convene. And I'll just note too that Representative Kropf is one legislator who's also been we've been in some early conversations around a couple of these juvenile justice related ideas. So just to note that. Next slide. Yeah, I think that's it. Look at that. That is kind of that legislative and yeah, that's our update around that. Look at that. Are we at 11? We want to do committee reports and
yes.
Oh, Tabitha, you're there. I thought you were
yes, sir.
On, but I couldn't find you. Now you're still here. Great.
So yes, committee reports. Thank you so much, Brian and Cord and Paul. Yeah. So equity disparity committee, and then health rules and research committee, and then the youth committee, then the executive committee and juvenile justice.
I'm sorry, do we need to do the rules presentation, or is that after this? I apologize.
Equity and disparity committee, then policy rules and research committee.
No, so sorry, re-engagement rules we skipped over, Tabitha.
Oh, did we? Oh, I'm sorry, Paul. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I said committee reports. That's my bad.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Paul. I'm sorry, Paul and Cord.
All right. I think Cord, you were up. Melissa, I think you're pulling up the slide deck. So just as to notify the council of the re-engagement OAR update process, if we want to move to the next slides, for the record, Paul Sell, Re-Engagement Systems Manager with Cord Bucher to give a quick update about the draft OARs for re-engagement. A hearing has been set and you received information in your packet regarding these rules. So this is just an update and general overview of that. So this slide that is on the screen currently shows the OARs and the ORSs around the statewide youth re-engagement system and what they typically address. This shift, so if we want to move to the next slide, these updates are to align the YDD youth re-engagement OARs with statute updates from back in 2021, House Bill 2051. And updates really are needed to reflect those statutory changes around re-engagement eligibility, age range for eligible youth, and the educational status of re-engagement participants, as well as agencies who may recommend youth. Again, I believe most of the council members have seen this when we first did this proposal and presentation to the legislature. So the next slide begins to outline the two rules that are being changed. So you can see the rule number there, 432.160.0001, and these are just mainly some editing changes around the definitions are the terms used to administer the re-engagement grants. The main piece was we did clarify the purpose of ongoing services, and so the next slide will show the actual changes. So you can see that there's an editing change at the first piece with YDD council being struck through, so that will be removed, and it just talks about re-engagement grant definitions. The blue highlights are the words that are being added. The main piece being that ongoing is being changed to post-completion. It's just a more common term, more easily recognizable in terms of the work for our grantees on that side. The next updates are for 432.160.0005. There is more change with this, summarizing those changes. The changes change the order of eligibility, because we do try to rank the eligible youth that are in that. Updates of who can recommend, as well as some, we didn't use acronyms this time, as well as some increases in age limitations. That's that increase to age 24. And then it also adds a new section around previously enrolled eligible youth of a re-engagement program. Again, this rule specifically outlines the eligibility criteria for enrollment into a re-engagement program. So the next slide is just a breakdown of the changes within that. So the strike through is language that's being taken out. The gray highlights are additions or shifts. So for example, A, B, and C were reordered. And so that was a minor piece. We also found a misspelling in this work. And then the last thing, so Oregon Youth Authority, the Oregon Department of Human Services, that was an acronym. So we did spell that out. The changes highlighted in blue, the main change for the legislation is the increase to age 24. You will note that item B, that's for a dropout status. That did not change because that is age limitations for K-12 education. And so that's where item A would come into play on that. We also did add language, or rewrote the language for A as well as C to include and have not earned a high school diploma or a high school eligibility credential. And that's just to clarify the rule on that side. The big shift in item 1 is on the next slide, where you can see we've actually added some language to help clarify and refine option D of eligible youth. So it's similar language. And I just noticed a cord. So just checking on that age 21. Is that an error?
No, that's not an error. This is the eligibility criteria for youth who are behind, off track graduation. So it would only apply to a youth who is enrolled in school, since it's based on school credit attendance.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry, had a little panic moment there. Yeah, so if a youth that's 22 to 24 would fall into that category A of that age increase. So again, you can see that that's defined a little bit further. We did break it down into subcategories of earning 3 or more credits, fewer than expected, That was language that was already in there, but we added the and statement and have had irregular attendance or been removed from active enrollment. This is to help programs keep really focused on that re-engaged youth option and versus just credit recovery options within that work. Item 2 there, the director has the youth can, or organizations can petition to have youth that are not listed in this section to the director. We've added or designee option for that. And then lastly, the next slide shows the third item that's been added. And this is to address a challenge that we learned in terms of moving between school years. And so a youth who is between the ages of 14 and 24 years of age and has enrolled in a re-engagement program in the previous school or academic term may be considered eligible to continue. So you'll notice that this does not have language that they have not been able, that they haven't completed their programming. This is to extend for that post-secondary, schooling completion options on that. I believe that might be the last slide. Yes, so thank you, that's always nice. So do you want to open it up for questions on that? If anybody had questions. Also want to do just a huge thank you to Jared and Molly who took on that process of updating that process. It is in depth to say the least of that. So thank you to Molly and Jared for making that work happen.
Okay, thank you, Paul and Cord. Cord, did you want to add something else?
I do. I was trying to clap, but yeah, there it is. I did want to just mention that we realize as we're looking through this that we didn't put a slide to say what happens next. And the next thing that happens is, as Paul mentioned, there is ODE has a rules hearing that we are able to tag onto. And so these will be open for public comment at that hearing. However, public comment can be submitted to us by email through January 15th. And then we'll have the final rules out to the council in advance of the March meeting, where we would ask for a vote to adopt those rules. And I believe, given the timeline, that upon adoption, they can then essentially be considered in effect. Usually it's about, I think, a 49-day period from when the draft rules are published, and we'll be well outside of that in March. So essentially, we just wanted to take the time to really get these right. I mean, even some of these minor changes, we kind of were really thinking through the ramifications for programs. So we'd hope to bring this sooner, but we plan to have it in place in time for the next round of grants. And so this will really allow us to carry out the broader re-engagement work that legislature approved in 2021. And that's it. Thanks to BD.
Oh, hey, no problem. Sorry you both got pressed time-wise. I just want to say, speaking of time, that we have about 15 minutes left, and we want to get the committee reports to take place. And if there is no report from different committees, great. But we really would like to make sure, Brian, I don't know where you are on this. Hopefully, I'd like to make certain that we have at least 5 minutes so that we can take questions from the community. I think that's really important. So public comments. So is there can we try to maybe what are you recommending here so that we can achieve those two goals? Or Melissa, were you going to weigh in? Or
I was going to weigh in. I think that we still have Christina on the phone. That's the only person whose name I can't see on the screen. And if that's indeed Christina, we don't have any members from the public attending at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. That's very helpful. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If I don't know that we have public comments, so we may not need to really spend that time. And I bet the committee reports can be pretty quick. We kind of have staff slated to just give the quickest of updates. There's Cord in the chat. So if you just want to run through them to me. And
yeah, so Jared, Bill, equity disparity.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I can give the update unless there are any members of the committee that would like to. I'm not seeing any hands or anything. So yeah, Jared Shaw here for the record. The Equity and Disparity Committee last met in October. And as Brian mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we are currently working on creating an equity lens and also on revising the land acknowledgement, which may where we might sort of shift focus a little bit to kind of a statement of commitment type of thing. So we're working on those drafts now. We have our next meeting scheduled for next Friday, December 16th at noon, where we plan to present a draft of the equity lens and those statements of commitment / land acknowledgement to the committee. And hopefully by the next council meeting, we would have those finalized so we could present to the full council. Bill and Brian, is there anything else you'd like to add there?
Nothing for me. I know we're getting near the noon hour. Thanks, Jared.
Okay. Well, thank you, Equity and Disparity Committee, Policy, Rules, and Research Committee, Court.
So I realized when I was getting prepped for this meeting that the Policy, Rules, and Research Committee, I don't believe we met during the quarter since the last council meeting. So I was just offering that if we're okay with our chairs, we could probably forego a report since we do not have any new information. But I'd just say that I'm excited about this work on looking at a sovereign nation fund, and I imagine that our committee and our members of our committee will be looking forward to digging into that. So I imagine we'll have an update next time.
Thank you very much, Court. Youth Committee, Abraham, or someone from
Yeah,
there?
I can speak for the youth committee. We haven't met formally, but actually we're finalizing that for next year. I've been taking the time to get to know all the youth committee members and really just trying to get to know them better before we go ahead and meet. As a matter of fact, I just messaged Janelle, so trying to set time to meet with her and just bring her up to speed. But I've been in communication with Marisela and just kind of exchanging ideas and kind of next steps. So we're getting there.
Okay.
So hopefully next quarter, I'll have a lot more to report.
Okay. Juvenile Justice Committee.
I think we already gave an update earlier today, but
So I think the only piece I would do is just remind everyone that the committee is always open to all of the members, and that we're going to be doing some pretty heavy, good, important work, and invite people to our next meeting. And our standing meetings are the first Monday of each month from 1 to 3.
Okay.
thank you,
so much.
Molly.
Yeah, thank you, Molly and Anya. Okay, well, Brian, I skipped you because I figured if there is any executive committee update, you could make that and then also segue into the YDC Meeting Roundup, key discussions and next steps for YDD staff. How about that?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Yeah. Full meeting. That's my recap. I appreciate your time and commitment. I'm glad we got those votes in. We've got some work to make sure we're getting all the, and Melissa, I think, will lead the charge on this, member terms and member training. So look out for an email about that. Some key decisions, approve the JCP County planning process. So thanks for folks having done that. We approved the RFA process, appreciate that. And also approved a work group probably made up of the Equity and Disparity Committee members and our Policy, Rules, and Research on the sovereign nation funding. We'll internally have some continued discussions about scoring priorities and ideas, meeting the need to see how we can continue to support small budget organizations, supporting collaboration and collective impact. We'll also, I think, be continuing to do some kind of scoring where the highest scoring application in a region continues to get an award, so that we are continuing to award across the state. But those are ideas that staff are going to wrestle with. The sovereign nation funding piece, obviously, again, as I mentioned, will go to a work group. I think that it does beg some interesting questions about other focused funding. So it'd be interesting to hear how the conversations go in that work group. Culturally specific organizations, linguistically specific efforts. So more to come from that work group. Next steps for us, obviously, we're going to get out communication around the council member trainings. I've already gotten an email this morning about the need to have council members do their trainings by the end of the year. So more to come there. Obviously, we'll get our committee meetings and work group meetings scheduled and moved forward. So that's to come. In-person YDC meeting, we're going to aim for that in March. So just as a reminder, we'll look at locations, whether at the Oregon Department of Education in the Public Service Building, or maybe Christina McMahon was emailing me about potential spaces that may enable hybrid options should we need it, if folks can't make it in person. Some more to come there. And I don't know, I'm going to stop my wrap up just because that's a lot that we've covered. I'll say also real quickly, something that Paul and I were kind of going back and forth on the RFA approval. And I just say it out loud. I think, next time around, 2 years from now, when we do this, we're thinking about ways to sort of bring that maybe to our policy, rules and research committee to have them kind of get the real detailed in the weeds view. And then we'll try to bring maybe a little less detailed, well, first to the committee for a recommendation to approve, and then maybe we can bring a little less detail or some less detail to the full council, but you can know that a committee has had a chance to really get into the weeds on some of those things. So looking for ways to kind of make our meetings as efficient as possible and focused on the big picture. So that's just something for us to think about in the future. Beyond that, that's it for me on the recap. Tabidi, I know I appreciate that you're still here.
No, yeah.
No, I was like, I know you got to go to a meeting. That's all I'm saying. So,
so if there are no further comments or questions, I move that we adjourn this December 8th meeting of the Youth Development Council. And until our next scheduled meeting, we'll move forward from there.
Wow. And we end 4 or 5 minutes early. Can you believe it?
Thank you, Tabidi. That was awesome.
I apologize. I'm sorry I put a little pressure on people. I just wanted to make sure there was time for the community to be heard. And so.
Sounds good. All right. Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Janelle.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.